Recording.
Go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the January 26th regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. May you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of
Of
allegiance
allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the
United States
States
of
of
America,
America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which
for
is
which it
stands
stands,
one nation,
one
one
nation,
under God,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
and
with
justice for all.
liberty
and justice for
justice
all.
for all.
for all.
Thank you. Okay, this evening, Director Mitchell is going to give us our land acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you. I'm just moving my camera, so I'm looking at the camera a little bit as I say this. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, and Tulalip peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land, on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for that. Let's see, may we please get a roll call?
President Mason,
Present?
Vice President Lassane,
Present,
Director Berg,
Present.
Director Mitchell,
Present.
Director Nichols,
Present.
Student Representative Hussein, Student Representative Pilch-Basson.
Present.
Hey, thank you, Jamie. First item of business, as usual, is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please give an overview of tonight's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to our public, good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the following: the superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, a segment for routine business, a segment for strategic progress monitoring, a segment for information and discussion, a segment for unfinished business, a segment for new business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes have been made. Item 11.01, performance matters implementation, updated, grammatical error was fixed in the presentation. And item 12.01, school reopening status update, a graph in the presentation was updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. The agenda is adopted, which takes us to recognitions. And we have a very special recognition tonight. I'm not sure who's going to get things started, but I see Kathy Reeves' name, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Yes, thank you. We would like to take some time tonight to recognize our board, as this is Board Appreciation Month. And we will start out with Dr. Salzman, but I will mention one thing, Jamie and Darlene. I see 3 of our presenters are attendees instead of panelists, so I'm not sure they're going to be able to speak. So if we can get them switched over, that would be fantastic. But we will start with Dr. Salzman.
Thank you. I would like to take this time to publicly recognize our board for the Board of Distinction, and as well as for your recognition for this, not just this month, but for everything you have done for the Everett Public School system and for students. This has been the most challenging time in public education, and our board has just been outstanding. We cannot get this work done without the support of our great board. But I want our public to know and our staff to know that just like all of us, our board of directors have gone through a great deal of challenges during this time. Okay, we were in this together from day one. Remember, we were the first district in the country to unfortunately have the first COVID case, and they've been with us side by side and able to just embrace the work, but also the challenge that they faced getting us here today. So to our board, not just this month, but every month, we appreciate you. We thank you. and you are the best board in the world, and we recognize you with our hearts, our love, and our care. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Kathy Woods and Dave Peters are next.
Well, President Mason, members of the board, Dr. Saltzman, yeah, it's a tremendous honor to be here tonight representing the Everett Association of the School Administrators as we express our genuine appreciation for the work that you do every day to benefit the students of Everett Public Schools. And as this is now my 24th year here in Everett, I'm very proud of the reaction that I receive when I share with others that I work in Everett Public Schools. And as a school board, your decisions are thoughtful and collaborative as you intentionally listen to the voices and the needs of students and their families, the community, and the employees of this great organization. Through your efforts, you embody each of the district's core values of equity, passion, integrity, learning, respect, diversity, and collaboration. And as the COVID pandemic has in many ways changed the needs of those that we serve, you have been responsive, keeping instruction as the priority through access to remote learning with one-to-one devices and internet hotspots, providing meals, not just to our students, but to their families, emphasizing the importance of social emotional learning, working to systematize equitable outcomes, and continually seeking feedback from our communities. And through your example, our collective benefit extends beyond our district boundaries and reaches across the state. We are so grateful to have such a dedicated, caring, and professional board guiding our work. And although this recognition is being expressed to you here today, we appreciate you every day and all year long. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you. And President Mason, members of the board, as Mr. Peters indicated, the members of our association, the Everett Association of School Administrators, which consists of principals, assistant principals, and directors, are so grateful for your leadership and advocacy on behalf of students, families, and our schools, and grateful for the trust that you place in all of us, in particular, the principals who lead our schools. As we did last year, at maybe one of the last times I saw many of you in person, the EASA will be donating a book with the theme of equity and inclusion for the library in each one of our schools. The school librarians will select the books, which will have a nameplate in it that reads, donated to, for example, Tambart Creek Elementary School by the Everett Association of School Administrators in January 2021, in recognition of the leadership, advocacy, and support of the Board of Directors of Everett Public Schools. Again, we want to thank you for your service and your advocacy and your support.
Jared, I think you are next.
Thank you, Kathy. On behalf of the 1,341 EEA members of the Everett School District, I would like to thank you for such amazing service to the community, our students, and our employees. And I'll broaden it beyond the 1,341 members that we have. I think you're outstanding advocates and for all the work that we do, everything from Olympia to what we're doing in our buildings to out in our communities. And I think it's really important to recognize too that your leadership in the Everett School District isn't just about the students, but the employees that we serve throughout the district. That's a really important point. And you've always shared values with the Everett Education Association to attract and retain the best teachers, I think, in the state of Washington. And that doesn't start unless you have an amazing school board with great people, just good people on its own. I mean, you have a great school board, you're great leaders, but you're all this wonderful people. And I don't want to miss that point. There's not one jerk among you. So it's really great to have you all on the board overall. And your amazing reputation. When I'm anywhere throughout the community or throughout the state, they always say, wow, I wish I had a school board like the Everett School Board, because they're doing things right there in Everett. So on behalf of the members that I serve, we want to thank you for being so important to the students, the employees, and most of all, the community that you serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Herman, President of the Everett PTSA Council, representing our council board and the 27 local PTAs in our district. January is School Board Appreciation Month for school districts across the nation, but we hope that you know that our genuine gratitude goes well beyond this one meeting and this one month. As school board members, you shoulder critical responsibilities and set the tone and set the example in very public ways of our district's core values. Strong schools make strong communities. We recognize your duty as board members is not easy, even in normal years, but especially given the circumstances of this past year. We appreciate your tireless work in asking the tough but important questions, keeping students learning and growing, and keeping the health and wellness of our entire school community in all aspects a top priority. We want to once again thank you for expanding opportunities for parent and community involvement as well, even though this is not taking place at the schools in person at this time. Shifting the school board meeting time this past September, opening up and recruiting parent and community members to the advisory councils, and participating in PTA and other community meetings and listening sessions, especially the Let's Connect series. All of these have been valuable in making connections at a time when this is especially challenging. We understand that there are some rocky months ahead as we, as a school community and within our families, figure out the best way to shift back from remote learning to in-person school. We appreciate your leadership to keep our district moving forward, using the best information and research to guide decision-making, and continually keeping a focus on equitable outcomes for all of our students. Washington State PTA is one of the state's largest child advocacy organizations, and here in Everett, we continue this work every day. We want to thank Director Nichols in his new role as the legislative representative for the school board, as well as Director Berg's role as a newly elected legislator. Her work on the House Education Committee will be valuable for the benefit of all students in Washington State. We look forward to our ongoing partnership with the school board to ensure that the voices of all of our students continue to be heard here in Everett and beyond. The note cards you received as a gift are designed from Reflections Art submissions. The Reflections theme was I Matter Because. This year, the program was done with pictures of the art and the artist statements submitted virtually, and we received over 100 submissions from our PTAs around the district. We hope that when we host this program next fall, we will be able to display the artwork back at the CRC for all to experience. In closing, I want to express our sincere appreciation once again for all you do to support our schools in making them the best that they can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And Kay?
Hi, thank you for our opportunity to talk to you and share how much on behalf of our team, our board, and our donors, how much we are grateful for each and every one of you and the countless hours that you've put in each month leading our schools and making difficult decisions, but also navigating through these unusual times. The support and extraordinary investment that you have put out in our community has been amazing. We benefit every day from your dedicated energies and the devoted time, and recognize that your contributions aren't just January, it's year round. And in honor of being locked down and people cooking a lot, we're not giving you cupcakes this year. We've decided, I hope you all got your journals, little gratitude journal to help us navigate through these times and let you know how much we truly do appreciate the work you do for our students, our staff, our community, and for our future. And we truly appreciate your partnership. So thank you.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you, school board.
I'd like to thank everyone for your thoughtful words and comments. Certainly, I think you all recognize that we are only as good as the work that you do. So it's very much a collaborative effort to make Everett Public Schools the best district in the state. And we are fortunate to work alongside so many talented people. I also want to thank you for the gifts, the book donation, note cards, journals. It's very thoughtful. I have a plant from last year that I brought home. I don't have a very green thumb, but it's still alive. And every time I look at it, I think about the gratitude that you have shown towards the school board, and work very hard to keep it going. That plant, anyhow, keep it alive. So I would like to turn it over to see if other directors would like to share any comments.
Caroline, I think you said it just fine. And I just want to show everyone the cards that we get every year from the PTA. I keep these and these go all over the country to my family and friends because I am still a letter writer, a card writer, to my niece, my nephew, my mom's cousins. I don't have, second cousins, aunts, uncles. So I cherish these cards. So as much as I'm thankful the book goes to the library, please always send me these cards.
And I was just going to say thank you as well for everything. It's definitely a team effort. So without our folks that are our teachers, our paras, our parents, our community, our foundation, none of this would be possible. So thank you for all that you do to support us as directors.
I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, everyone has said such wonderful things, and it's truly true that we could not have done it without you guys. We could not, I mean, we get our energy because of you, of the things that you do for students and what you do for our greatest resources. You guys work together and you bring it to us. You help us understand, and we get our energy from what goes around us, and you are that. I would like to also ditto what Tracy said about the cards. I write too, and I love those cards, and people have asked, where did you get that? That's cool. And it's so true. Kids' art is wonderful, and I use it all the time. So thank you very much for the gifts, the journals especially. I continue to use them as well to write. And I just love it. I just love this. As I mentioned before, this is the best gallery shot. I have the opportunity of being with all of you because you guys make our work seem so easy. Thank you.
And I'll just second all of that by saying you folks do make it incredibly easy to be on this board. A lot of the hard work and hard do. And yes, those cards are the best thank you cards, and general correspondence cards. I use them constantly, so I'm excited to get those. Another set of those. I'm running low.
Okay, thanks to you.
I was hoping for the cupcakes, though. That's kind of hard to have no cupcakes. Though.
Maybe next year, Pam.
Sorry, Pam.
Okay, what a great way to start the meeting for all of us on the board. And I'd also like to, before we move on, just acknowledge our student representatives and their contribution to the board. Although they are not officially a part of the school board, the proclamation by the government for School Board Recognition Month, they are certainly unofficially an enormous part of the work that we do, and just so thankful to have them on board to give us a different perspective. Okay, with that, I think we're go ahead and move on, and that takes us to 7.0, which is our superintendent's report. Dr. Salzman.
Thank you, and good evening again, and again to our board, well deserved, and we're just so happy to work with you every day. I would just like to call a few shout outs this evening to a few people in my report, and I'd like to start with Jared Kink and Laura Rogers, and you probably don't hear their names in every board meeting, but they've worked side by side with us as we have communicated with the staff during these different times, and it's been a lot of meetings, a lot of discussion. Their advocacy has helped a great deal, and appreciate their partnership. And I think I want the public to know that, and our board to know that. And then also Mr. Dave Peters. So a year ago, almost a year ago, Dave Peters was leading Jackson High School, and with grace and dignity, how he led his school, our community, through the COVID world. okay, and very challenging. And then in his new role, he really works extremely hard to make sure that we have that social emotional learning component every day, as well as safety in our building. So you may not know what people do behind the scenes, but I wanted to call those individuals out this evening and to say thank you, and to say to our community again, thank you for your patience during this time. These are challenging times and we can only do it together. So thank you and appreciate everybody's efforts.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move to director comments. And if people have something they'd like to share or comment to make, please just raise your hand or jump in. This would include our student representative as well.
Well, I'll jump in. So that was such a great, overwhelming presentation by everyone. So that was awesome. This last couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to talk a lot with parents and a lot with, I had a great presentation actually at Jackson to some of the counselors there and got some feedback from them as well. And so I just feel like this has been kind of a 2 weeks of communication. And one of the pieces I got from the parents that have reached out to me is just asking if there could be, I don't know what the right word is, but more streamlined communication about as we transition. There's just a lot of fear I know going on because we're talking about hybrids and changing and things like, you know, which one did I sign up for? Did I sign up for hybrid? Did I sign up for virtual? And one question that I got that I hadn't really resonated was, you know, who will my teacher be as we go in? So I'm just putting that kind of out there because that's some of the feedback I'm getting from the community. And I think the more we can communicate, we did a fabulous job as a district communicating at the beginning of this. Like Dr. Salzman said, we were the first district in the nation to have to deal with a COVID positive student, and we really over communicated, which was phenomenal. And our community saw it. So anyway, just putting that out in the universe. But the other thing that in talking with the counselors was really about reimagining what it's going to look like when we get back to normal. And hearing, I think it was Jen who mentioned some of the differences even this last year that we've made as a board and as a district, moving our times to make our meetings more accessible, opening up our work groups to parents in the community to be able to apply for these positions. Things like that have made a huge difference. So I'm excited to see what's next, because I know we can make ourselves even more equitable and more accessible and more inclusive. And one thing to remember is that as we read all these great books about equity and we hear all these great speakers talk about equity and what to do, you know, as board members, we're leaders. And so we can actually do the things that we're reading about and that we're learning about. So the question becomes, how do we challenge ourselves in this next year to do it? And I'm hoping that we can make it better for the kiddos that are coming back to more traditional schools, and that they'll see a difference. And I'll just kind of end it with that report that we saw at our last meeting. I think a lot of us were shocked, you know, by what we saw in terms of how the community felt, how our parents felt, what some of those numbers were looking like for our kiddos in school. And so we know we have kind of this roadmap of how we can get better. So the question is, how do we do it between now and when we reopen, and what does equity and inclusion look like in this reimagined education space? So those are kind of my comments, kind of how my brain is working right now. But I tell you, all the parents and students out there, it's going to be okay. And you know, we're almost hopefully back to a new normal. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Berg.
If I can go next. I had the pleasure of attending the last instructional review at Cedarwood on the 13th. And one thing that I really liked about this review, and what I like about Cedarwood too, and all of our schools, but Cedarwood being historically one of the top schools in the entire state. The instructional reviews of the prior officers I've been to, I never hear them resting on their laurels saying, oh, we got 94% or we got 97%. It's always, who are those kids that we didn't reach? And I really appreciate that constant communication to the leadership and to the board and to the parent community of who are we not reaching. And they gave the specific example of a student who had an attendance problem. And I believe the student was an English learner, but they met with the family, they worked with the family, they were able to get the student in with the Y, and the student does not have an attendance problem. That is the power of the staff at each one of our schools. And that's a story from Cedarwood, but I believe that stories like that are happening at every one of our schools. So thank you for that. I just have to say that today is my daughter's last Tuesday at home. We are now on our lasts. When your child is a baby, you do not remember the last time you changed a diaper. You do not remember the last time you put them to bed or you gave them a bath. As they grow up, senior year, we were supposed to remember all of the lasts, but COVID hit, so the lasts kept continuing. A week from today, Becca and I will be flying to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for me to take her to college. And the fact that her college is reopening is not a reflection of our reopening plans, because her college has a population not too much bigger than Jackson High School, but is the size of a typical college campus. So there's lots of room. Her college will not have open cafeterias. The kids will have grab and go back and eat in their rooms. Half of her classes will be virtual, half of them will be live. There will be no students at athletic events. So it will be not the full college experience, but at least she gets to leave the house and hopefully really, really enjoy herself. So to April's point last week, I have spent some time this week really reflecting on what we heard 2 weeks ago about the college information. And so just really, really thinking about it. Just to reiterate, 60 to 65% of our kids go to a 2 or 4 year college, with the national average being 71%, but that's not, that much lower, but just a question of, do we prepare and allow each child to see college as an opportunity? That I do believe that college is not the right thing for every student, but are we doing everything we can to eliminate? I don't know. And I know that is something we are really, really working on. My mother, my father, and my nephew all went high school to military. My mother and father both, after they got out of the military, were able to get a master's level education. My nephew is now in community college. They presented some 2-year numbers, which weren't too bad. But then it was the 6-year graduation numbers that 50% of that 66% actually ended up with a degree, 14% at 2-year, 36% 4-year. So just questions that, are we preparing students for the rigor of college? Are we giving them all the financial resources that are in our control? But at the same time, when we look at these numbers, so much of what happens to students when they leave here is outside of our control. That my niece did have to drop out of college because her mother got sick. She has now graduated college and has been approved to nursing school at Mass General. So I'm so proud of her. But she would have shown, if she graduated from our school, she would have shown up in here as not having graduated within 6 years. So many of our kids, if they go to Everett Community College, if they have to move out, they don't have the financial resources to pay tuition, rent. That's a huge change for 18-year-olds. I've seen some of it, anecdotal only, but just as we're working, again, how do we re-envision this? How are we preparing our students for their next step? I just think it really is, that graduation rate is enormously high, but how do we make sure that we're giving them what we can when they leave our doors, but know also that a lot of what happens is outside of our control, and just allow that. So thank you so much. And I don't do this work for the recognition, but I really do like the thank yous once in a while, because this is the hardest, best work I get to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for sharing your thoughts on that. Director Nichols.
And say that after a conversation today with Dr. Saltzman during our one-on-one, I thought it was important to remind the community that we're going through with these reopening phases, and there's a lot to it, and the district has gone through great lengths to try to ensure everyone's safety, from students to staff, faculty, and we're trying to make the best decisions we can. One place where we could really use your help, no matter which side of the fence you fall on, whether you want schools to reopen tomorrow or you're still on the fence of if they should reopen at all for in-person learning, is to contact your state representatives and senators, the governor's office, and encourage them vehemently to get these vaccines available for our teaching staff. We need that to help make sure we're all safe. You know, we're opening slowly, so that's going to help mitigate some risks. But if we want to get back to in-person learning, and I know the kids are dying to get back in person, I know parents are dying to get their kids back in school. Let's do some advocacy, all of us, because our politicians have so much coming at them right now, more than normal. This is important to them, but they need your pressure. They need your voice in order to make that happen. So please, please, please help us help you get everything back open.
Thank you for that reminder. Appreciate that. Student Representative, Director Lassane.
I guess just in that same spirit of giving thanks, I want to thank everyone, all the school board directors and Dr. Saltzman especially for giving me the opportunity at all to get to voice these opinions at a higher level. I think that including student voices in any sort of decision-making process that will affect students like in any way is really important. And I've seen like more than ever steps being taken in that direction within the last few years. I think people are starting to realize that the young people of my generation especially have something to say. And you guys have done a really good job at recepting that. So yeah, today I was actually in the building at Jackson for the first time in almost 11 months, taking the PSAT. So it was weird being back there for one day when I don't know when I'll get to go back. But I guess the other thing I want to say is I just want to thank you guys for transparency, at least at the high school level. I know that there's been a lot of efforts to like not get our hopes up and really think about these things and not try and make promises for the rest of the year, especially with the high schoolers going back last. And that's really appreciated, because if we were to be told like, hey, you guys are going back in March, and then for it to not happen, that would just make things significantly worse. And that's something Dr. Saltzman and I talked about in one of our bi-weekly meetings. So I just want to say I appreciate all of your work, and I appreciate your transparency and your allowing for me to express opinions on things like that.
Thank you. We appreciate getting your opinions on a lot of things. So we're glad you're on board. Director Lassane, do you have anything to share?
Nothing right now. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And I too, and given it's a long meeting and we've already shared a lot, I'm going to pass on personal comments as well tonight. So that takes us to public comments. And I believe tonight we do have at least one public comment. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, the first one is from Patrick Hall. He says, Dr. Saltzman and Everett School Board Directors, I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation and respect for all the staff and teachers of the Everett School District. Their many sacrifices and unwavering dedication to their students during this trying time are an inspiration to us all. I also wanted to thank you for creating the Longfellow Property Advisory Task Force, of which I was a member. It is unfortunate that the group was disbanded before we could complete our work, although we did make some progress. While serving on this team, I informed the district that I intended to nominate the building to the National Register of Historic Places. That nomination is now complete and has been forwarded to the City of Everett for review by the Historical Commission. I have attached it for your information. The district will be given the opportunity to comment. I am writing today to explain the rationale for this nomination and to address common misconceptions about the register. The legislation that created the National Register of Historic Places was introduced into the Senate in 1966 by Everett's own Henry M. Jackson, who attended Longfellow as a child. It was intended to limit the ability of the federal government to demolish historic properties for highway construction, which was occurring on a massive scale at the time. It does not limit what the owner can do with the property. The register qualifies the owner for a 20% federal historic tax credit for restoration work. Even though the district doesn't pay federal taxes, it can still make use of the credit through a tax credit investor. The tax credit is often what makes a rehabilitation project pencil in. The tax credit is the reason for the nomination. The registration process is long and complex and often takes 1 to 2 years to complete. I and the volunteers who helped me have just made a future rehabilitation of Longfellow easier by giving you a head start. A great deal of volunteer time and energy have been spent on this nomination, plus editing and review by state architectural historian Michael Hauser in Olympia. This work is our gift to the Everett School District. You might wonder why the Longfellow Annex was included in the nomination as a contributing building. The local preservation community had not previously considered it to be historically significant. However, the requirements for a National Register nomination are very specific and technical. As such, Michael Hauser informed me that I must include the 1957 annex before it falls within the period of significance, 1911 through 1971. Finally, I wanted to clarify the results of the task force. We intended that the best and highest use of the property is to remain with the district. However, if the terse summary didn't make this clear, we did not intend that to include demolition. Demolition was specifically considered as a separate option, but it didn't make the short list of the top 4. The group intended the property to be preserved and adaptively reused by the district somehow. This nomination supports that intent. Thank you. Patrick Hall, resident of Everett School District. The second one is from Michael Bauer. I read the email January 25th from the superintendent about transition to phase 3. I have some feedback on the communication that I want to share with the board. By reading the email, it wasn't clear what criteria is allowing the change to phase 3. I can imagine some people who are not as informed would see the transition and think that it's because things are improved so much that it is now safe to reopen. I went to the Seattle Times Washington COVID metrics and saw that we are currently near the peak for infections per day and also deaths per day. I don't understand why we are opening now at these peaks when the metrics were clearly better in the past. September, for example, but really any other time in the last year was the same or better. If better metric indicated that it was not safe to return, then what is the rationale? This makes me question the safety for my students and their school faculty. I feel it would be helpful if we were given the information to make the decision for returning to in-class instruction. I want to be aware of this. I want to be aware if this is being done because there is political pressure, possibly with simply lowering the standards to reach in-class learning, or if it is genuinely based on data and improvements in cases. Also, looking at the district webpage, I do not see any explanation of the criteria used to determine the transition between the different model stages. There is a lot of discussion about vaccines and shortages in the news. It would be good to communicate whether teachers will be vaccinated before returning. I worry for their safety as well during the return to the classroom. I think parents need to have these types of information to make an informed decision around their child's safe return to school. Please consider what can be communicated to help us with this. Thank you for listening, Michael. And that is all of them.
Thank you very much for reading both of those. It will be nice when we're back in person and we can invite people into the boardroom to share their thoughts with us in person. I also would like to publicly thank Patrick Hall for his volunteering. He has put in quite a few hours regarding the Longfellow building and serving on the committee and also on the Historic Commission. So I just want to thank him for his efforts as well. Okay, we are going to go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. And Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of tonight's consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Directors. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the Superintendent's office received no questions. The consent agenda is presented as published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we'll go ahead and move to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The consent agenda is approved, which takes us to strategic progress monitoring. And tonight we have a fairly
Hey,
robust.
Jen? I'm sorry.
We have a fairly robust presentation regarding the implementation of performance matters across our district. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Catherine Matthews. Dr. Catherine Matthews.
And actually, before Dr. Matthews starts, I just want to say thank you. This is Dr. Boughton, your CAO, and I wanted to just thank you for being here. We're really excited this evening to share a little bit about Performance Matters implementation update. We'll be sharing some of the steps we've taken to fully implement the Performance Matters as best we can in our current pandemic situation. However, we also are really excited to have some guests here to share about their experiences with Performance Matters as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Matthews.
Thank you. And just confirming you're seeing the presentation?
Correct.
Thanks. All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity to share how Performance Matters supports student learning, guides instruction, and informs school improvement. As Dr. Boughton mentioned, we do have a number of principals and teachers with us that will be sharing their experience in implementing Performance Matters in their building, and we'll introduce them in a little bit later in our presentation. So this presentation and really Performance Matters as a tool itself are both focused on the following strategic plan goals. Students meet or exceed standards by the end of kindergarten. Students meet or exceed college career life readiness indicators in grades 3 through 12. Common content and outcomes are provided across all like classes, and state and federal achievement targets are met or exceeded. With respect to the 4 pillars, Performance Matters falls under systems and instruction. And though one of the big rocks itself, as we call them, it also significantly supports equitable outcomes for our students. Through this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of the elements of effective implementation and how Performance Matters meets those elements, the professional development plan for Performance Matters, and the progress toward implementation, the usage of data analytics and assessments, how our school leaders and our staff are using Performance Matters, and then our next steps for expanding that usage. So effective implementation really of anything, any tool or program or new strategy really requires 3 things: a need or purpose, a solution that meets that need or purpose, and then fluid professional development strategies that meet the diverse environments that the solution will be implemented in. So for our needs, of course, we have a need for student learning data, particularly in this remote environment, and the changes in how we deliver instruction, and with the gaps in our state assessment data, that student learning data is more important than ever. In addition, we have a need for standards-based assessments to evaluate learning, identify learning needs, and inform instruction. And finally, we have the need to create common assessments as well as classroom-based assessments that are aligned to the standards, and more importantly, easy for us to analyze in terms of student learning needs. So we really have the solution in Performance Matters for those needs. As Performance Matters is an integrated data analytics and assessment design, delivery, and analysis tool. It is interactive and flexible and intuitive, and it can be used in remote learning. It allows us to both use our existing assessments as well as design new ones using either item banks that are aligned to the standards, or by creating our own assessments and our own items. Finally, we really need those fluid strategies that are going to meet the needs of the environment that we're implementing in, and particularly now when we're doing things in a very different way than we have in the past. So our PD plan, our professional development plan for Performance Matters, addresses both common learning expectations for building administrators and directors, facilitators and coaches, as well as a phased in and scaled implementation to meet the needs of individual buildings and their readiness to benefit from the tool. So here you're seeing a slide you've seen before, and this is really just an overview of the professional development that we've had since August for our principals, directors, facilitators, our instructional coaches, and then content leads, especially in the secondary school, those early adopters who have jumped into using the program. And our goal over the course of this fall has really been to create those common understandings of the powerful tool that Performance Matters is. So the dashboard, reporting, assessment design and delivery, and then analytics as well. The second phase of our professional development is really targeted more in the building level. So we have really two things going on. We have those early adopters who are ready to use and design assessments. And those early adopters are being trained by my team, but also by the content directors on the academic team in assessment design and delivery, item design and delivery, and then scoring, item analysis, and reporting of data to benefit the classroom. And then the second part of the professional development is really around the whole building staff trained by the principal. And I probably would put reporting first on the list because, as you know, school improvement planning is the first thing that we do right out of the gate in August. And our principals really use Performance Matters quite a lot to provide that data to their staff. And now we've started to move into those other phases. We have staff that have done a practice test. We have other staff that are giving assessments and designing assessments and moving forward with the tool in its full capacity. So far this year, we have had 243 assessments designed that come from our instructional maps. So those are assessments that existed already, and they're either being translated into the program or redesigned and put into the program, excuse me. And then we have 81 that have been built by teachers, and you'll hear from some of those teachers today. Now, you have heard me say over the years, hopefully many, many times, that giving an assessment alone changes nothing. It is what we do with the data from an assessment that makes a difference in student learning. And Performance Matters, through its data analytics and assessment analytics, can really support improved student learning, interventions, and guide instruction. First, it does it through analytics by allowing teachers and building administrators, central office staff to combine both prior achievement data In this case, you're seeing the Smarter Balanced Assessment from 4th grade in 2019 for our current 6th graders with local assessment data. So this is actually current 6th grade data. And this is one assessment, but it's broken down by standard so the teachers can see which standard students have achieved and which they have not. If looking at this data, we can easily see patterns of improved performance over time, as well as pervasively low performance. So teachers and administrators can also evaluate individual tests from this data. So here you're seeing a test that has 3 standards on it, and a teacher or administrator can look at this data and they can see that one standard was achieved well by students while another not as well. And by digging more deeply into the data using the platform, teachers can understand which questions students did well on and which questions they did not. So by analyzing this, teachers might decide that there is a concept or standard that needs to be completely retaught. And they might decide that there are other standards where a small group might need an intervention. They might even decide that there's a question that didn't properly assess the standard and maybe needs to be thrown out or redesigned. So as you know, I love metrics. And this is user data. This is one of the metrics that we do look at. What you're seeing here is users and days of use by level. So we have our elementary, middle, high school, and district. And so you see in blue the number of users. Elementary had 504 of its users. That would be administrators and teachers. And those users use the product for a collective 3,630 days. Over here, on the other hand, we have our district users. This would be primarily the content directors and facilitators that are building assessments in the program and working with school staffs. So there are 62 users have used it for 1,030 days. And so this tells part of the story, right? And one might look at elementary and feel that that's the highest use, but we really have to look at users per day of use is one way to do that. So for example, elementary on average would be 7 days per user. The district would be 16.6. And of course, average really isn't telling the story. So we want, of course, users to integrate this tool into daily work. So we can look at it also from range of days. So this distribution here is helping us to better understand the days of use by users. And so here you see the number of users broken down by each of the levels, elementary, middle, high, and district. And each of these categories is 10 days. So you can see that the greatest number of users are in that 1 to 10 day range. And then it starts to drop off precipitously. And these users out on this end are probably the test builders who are using the product every day, or the principals who are digging into the data every day. And ultimately, you'll see this as we get to our last slide about next steps. What we want to do is we want to see more users using the product more often. And that is really going to come from that implementation of the next level of professional development. So this view shows us the total number of page visits by level. And as you can see, for elementary, 588,000 and change since we started the program, so over 500,000. And I will just say that someone on this call, who shall remain nameless, had 80,000 of those page visits. So The people that are getting in there and building tests, they're using it on a regular basis, and that's our goal for the product. And then over here you see 355,000 page visits for the district, about 250,000 at middle school. High school is quite a bit lower at 87,000, and that's going to be a goal area for us for sure. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Boughton to introduce our panel, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their use of the product.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Yes, I'd love to introduce Dr. Betty Cobbs, who is the principal at Woodside Elementary School. And she has brought with her Kylie Hollenbeck, who is one of her 3rd grade teachers. We've invited Bruce Rhodes, who's the principal at Cedarwood, and his instructional literacy coach, Jamie Klontz, to be with us tonight. Mitch Entler, the principal at North Middle School, and his ELE, English Language Arts and English Learner teacher, Alicia Brown Forbes, is joining us this evening. And Michael Takayoshi, principal at Cascade High School, has brought with him Trisha Percival, who is one of the math teachers at Cascade High. And we actually are also going to have Mr. Fleckenstein, our regional superintendent from the South region, also join in answering a few questions about how they're using Performance Matters. So a lot of times when we think about those users, we think, oh, it's a teacher tool, or it's a principal tool, or it's a Dr. Matthews tool. But really, the tool is diverse, and it's really intended to be used in a wide variety of ways. So we thought the best way to provide some of that information to our board this evening is to ask the practitioners to share a little bit. So our guest panelists, I'd ask you to unmute yourselves. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Dr. Matthews to stop sharing the questions so that we can see our panelists' faces. And I think what we'll do is we're going to start with the first question, which is, how are you using Performance Matters? And I'd like to ask Jamie Klontz, who's the literacy coach at Cedarwood Elementary, to just share a few minutes about how she's using Performance Matters. Jamie?
Hi there, good evening. One of the ways we are using Performance Matters at Cedarwood is for collecting and analyzing foundational data. So earlier in the year, I uploaded the REACH assessments for letter names, letter sounds, phonological awareness, phonics, and high frequency words. Basically to help us look for any gaps that students might have in their foundational skills.
Very nice. Thank you, Jamie. I would love for Mr. Takayoshi. Michael, would you please share a little bit about how you use Performance Matters at the high school level?
Yeah, so thank you. Good evening. So one of the things that we found it's been very helpful is that when we collect data kind of at a systems level, we're able to send it to teams. And traditionally, when we collect that data, we have to kind of pull from different sources. What's really nice about Performance Matters is you can kind of pull lots of disparate pieces of data and put it in kind of a one-stop shop. And so when I send it to a group of people, actually, what's nice about that is they can actually look at their individual students. So one of the things that we've done with our teams is we can send a larger group of students to them, and I don't have to go and sort through it and say, this is your student. When they look at it, they actually see their students associated with it. And so that's been extremely helpful, as well as then also guiding us in terms of being able to pull together and really make some sense of the data and be able to then turn that into professional development based on gaps that we're seeing.
Great, thank you, Michael. Mr. Fleckenstein, as regional superintendent, how do you use Performance Matters in your daily work?
Yeah, so my relationship in supporting schools is to use Performance Matters to identify trends and patterns within a school. Our board of directors are very familiar with school improvement plans that we have posted on our websites, but also the instructional review process. So as we sit down with the school leadership, using Performance Matters has helped us to integrate, like Mr. Takayoshi said, integrate multiple forms of data to identify those areas of focus for which our action plans are created, both the school improvement plans and the IR action plans.
Great, thank you. I'd like to ask a couple of our teaching staff who are on this call and start maybe with Trish Percival, who teaches math at Cascade High School. Trish, how does Performance Matters help you to support your students' achievement and learning? Could you speak a little to that?
I'd love to. So the very first thing is I can grade these assessments quickly, and the turnaround time is probably the next day. And we all know that feedback for kids has to be really prompt. And based on the data like Catherine showed us, I can see which problems classes typically struggled with. So the next day I can address those issues with students to make sure that they feel success. We also have the ability for kids to go back into their portal and see what they did on their tests. My students have to do a reflection on their learning, so they have to be able to go back and see that test. For kids during this pandemic, not every kid is online. So this allows kids to take tests on their own time. I have some kids taking tests at midnight, and I'm okay with that. So this just gives a lot of success to my kids and allows them to feel like they are doing something.
Fantastic, thank you. Kylie Hollenbeck, how do you use Performance Matters to support your students' achievement and learning?
We have been using Performance Matters mostly for the end of unit tests, which have allowed us to gather data for where our kids are at after the teaching, which then allows us to identify students that maybe need the extra support, or also identify the specific concepts and skills on the test, because the test will break down those concepts and skills for us. Which then allows us to target those concepts and skills again in a reteaching setting if we needed to.
Fantastic. Alicia Forbes-Brown, I know that you teach at North Middle School and you teach both EL, English language arts, as well as English learners or emerging bilingual kids. Can you speak a little bit about how PM supports your students' achievement and learning?
So I work with the 6th grade ELA team here, and it was sort of all born from the fact that at the beginning of the school year, we were like, how do we know our kids are learning? I mean, it really came from that. How do you know? I've got, 25 kids on my screen and 2 faces. So I'm teaching to names. And so that was really bothering us. And when Mitch showed us Performance Matters, this is just my 2nd year here, and I've taught in other states and other districts. And last year was pretty tough for me personally, because I was like, where is everything? Where is everything? There was no house anywhere for me. And they call it different things in different states and different districts. But I was so happy to see that, oh, okay, now we have a house. So we go there and we get everything. But we really have nailed it down to it started out the way everybody else is using it, as far as finding, data that we needed to sort of see where our kiddos were at prior to coming to us. But how we use it is we teach and we assess, and we write our own quizzes. And then based on our quizzes, then we know, which standard is they got it, we can move on, what standard we need to bring back around the next week, spiral it in, and then we build. And so each test you're gonna see, or each quiz, we're calling them quizzes because we don't want to scare them with tests, but we're building our own. And basically it's from our teaching, it's from our materials, it's the way we can write it, the way we teach it, we can write it how we've presented it, we can use the right, the same terminology that we use when we're teaching it. So it's very personal. And so what's great about it is that we can analyze which questions, and standards they didn't get, spiral it into the next test, and then bring in the action plan of our interventions, which we just had today, and reteach or group and have those kiddos, because the ELLs are sprinkled in all my ELA classes now. So I can bring them in and kind of intervene and show them last week's quiz. You struggled with this question. What did you not understand? What we get insight with that, and then we can sort of ask the same type of question, but in a different way that is sort of built out of our interventions. So it's really hands-on. It's been really from the ground up, but it was all born to how do we know our kids are learning or not? That was the big thing for us at the beginning of the year.
Thank you, Alicia. And Jamie, could you wrap this question up? How does Performance Matters help you to support your students' achievement and learning as a literacy coach?
Yeah, Performance Matters allows us to have all the data in one place so that it's easy to share with stakeholders. So for example, the foundational test that I was talking about is the data is primarily collected by our paras, because it's a one-on-one assessment that teachers really don't have the time to do. So we want to get that data to the teachers as fast as possible. So this allows us to share that data. And then with the data, it helps us make those instructional decisions for our Tier 2 interventions for our LAP program, but also for a small group reading support in the classroom for teachers.
Fantastic. Well, we've heard some really great instructional use of this for our students, but I'd like to turn to a couple of our leaders on this call. Mitch, can I ask you, how does Performance Matters help you to grow your skills as an educator and a leader of North Middle School?
Sure. And you know, I'm going to piggyback on a lot of what's already been said, but I think that's okay because the messaging has been so great. But what I've enjoyed about learning and implementing Performance Matters is that for me personally, it's expanded my ability to assist giving our teachers a tool that they feel good about, you know, as far as measurement and the data that's coming back. You know, we're seeing real-time progress on standards and the informative data that we're getting. You know, we're excited about it because we're getting better at it as we're using it. It's really helpful. The data is really helpful for us in targeting specific students that need additional support and being real responsive to adjusting our instruction for all students. And I think the thing I'm most excited about is that, you know, like Alicia brought up, it's been very grassroots and very ground up, and we're continuing to build momentum as people see success stories with it and what it can provide our students.
Fantastic. Dr. Cobbs, can you share a little bit about how this has helped you to grow your skills as an educator and leader? You're a longtime leader in this district. Would you mind sharing?
Not at all. Thank you so much, and good evening to everyone. The Performance Matters, of course, was something that was new to us and new to me as well. And in a year that we have been so preoccupied with remote learning and with the pandemic and all the things that we were working on, you know, having one more thing to work on was a bit of a challenge for the staff. And so I always learn along with my staff. But one of the things that I needed to do was to develop an understanding among the staff on how to use Performance Matters and how it can help support the work that we're doing. One of the things that we do is we have gone through our development of our school improvement plan and our action plan following up on the instructional review is to go deeper into the data. And Performance Matter helps us to do that by allowing us to pull up all the information in the baseball card format or report so that we can see several areas. We can see data over the years. We can look at the school grade level classrooms, different groups of students that will help us to identify those students that are the most needed of interventions and such. And so working with Dr. Matthews and others in the district that have supported our growth, we've done a lot of professional development to have different grade levels come on board at their readiness and utilize it. You could see the work that Kylie was talking about in third grade. It's happening at different levels and different grade levels, and it's proving to really provide a source of information that's really helpful to the work that we're doing that aligns with our action plan for increasing student achievement in the school.
Thank you, Dr. Cobbs. Mr. Rhodes, we've had Jamie share a little bit about kind of how she uses this tool. How has it helped you to grow and cultivate your leadership skills at Cedarwood?
Thank you, Dr. Bowden. I'm really pleased that we have gotten this great tool that everything is in one place that we can really monitor in an effective and efficient way. I think the biggest thing that has helped me as a leader is to really dig in myself and learn those skills. And with Jamie's help as well, the coaches are able to really dig down into which is identifying, but it's easy for me to have conversations and my assistant principal to be able to really set the goals that were to our SIP plan for those kids that were not performing and the foundational skills in particular. And then when we're meeting with them through observation and through their mid-year coming up, really digging down using multiple measures that we can really readily get to and dig down to where the needs are that they can support in the classroom has been really helpful for us to be able to have those conversations and be able to share that data and have conversations about next steps. And I'm looking forward to working with Dr. Matthews coming up next pretty soon to be more into the formative assessments as readiness has come now to the forefront because they now can see through the steps we've made to be able to utilize it more efficiently and more frequently.
Perfect, thank you. And Michael and Mr. Fleckenstein, Larry, I was wondering if maybe you guys could share anything that hasn't been shared yet. We're just looking at time, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you know, apart from the fact I found myself one morning working like on a distance call, helping to co-write a test with a social studies teacher, and that being really fun, that being a really great opportunity to really kind of dig into the actual the building of a test, and then talking about what would be useful on the back end, right? How would I use this with multiple students, particularly students who might struggle? So I think there's an element there with getting, well, obviously we have this data rich element, but getting to an action oriented mindset around the building of an assessment. So I think it's really exciting to think about the potential of this tool moving down in the future.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I would build onto those comments and Bruce's as well. It ultimately is shifting our ability to serve all students more effectively. If we're going to close gaps in our students' performance, if we're going to serve each of our students groups effectively, this shifts us from a static data system to a dynamic data system. And that ability to get timely information is helping us to better serve kids.
Thank you so very much. Dr. Matthews, can you go ahead and take us to our next steps with Performance Matters?
Yes. So as I mentioned, it's really about increasing users and use. So we want to see more teachers across the content areas and grade bands, particularly using assessment and reporting. We want to bring more central office staff on in the reporting functions. And of course, students using both assessments and the portal. And then continue to increase use by continuing to transition those common assessments from the maps, creating those classroom-based assessments with our teaching staff and helping them to do that. And then just expanding that professional development around analytics and assessment as we move forward.
So I just would like to thank our panelists this evening for helping to share a little bit about how they're using Performance Matters from the practitioner's lens. These guys are absolute rock stars, and we really appreciate your sharing tonight. But we have left some time for some questions from the directors. So thank you. This completes our presentation. Dr. Matthews, if you'll stop screen sharing, and I will turn it back over to President Mason if you'd like to facilitate questions.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of our guests tonight. The firsthand experiences are just so relevant compared to another slide with a bunch of bullets on it. We just learn so much better that way. So thank you for taking your time tonight to be here with us. And if you can hang on for a little bit, I'm going to open it up to questions to the directors and allow them to ask really anyone a question or offer a comment. Directors or student representative?
I have a quick question. Well, probably not going to be quick, but the response anyways. So, you know, I love data as well. It's a hugely useful tool. And in addition to what it seems like this immediate feedback and the immediate interventions we're able to provide in learning areas, have we found it useful at all as far as identifying students needing additional resources kind of in a systemic fashion? So they're doing okay, and then they're tanking across all their classes. And does somebody have, you know, sight of that and is acting appropriately? And I don't know who would be best to answer that question, but.
Well, I would just invite the principals if you have an example. And Mitch, you look like you might have something to say there.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, we haven't had the opportunity to look at it across the entirety of maybe their whole schedule, like you were bringing up, but it definitely, because we can assign specific standards to questions throughout the assessments, we see holes and gaps right away. And the beauty of that is that we can respond immediately. So that, you know, and I think that's part of what we're so excited about as far as the more we learn about it. I think we're going to get to a point like you just described of looking across the student's entire schedule to see if we see consistencies outside of our individual classrooms.
And is that just a matter of having just more data in the system to look at, compare against, and things like that as the data becomes more robust?
Yeah, you absolutely can do what you are suggesting. And I think in the beginning of the year, as schools were looking at placement, and particularly those transitions from 5th to 6th grade or 8th to 9th grade, that longitudinal data is really, really helpful. As we continue in the system, it will grow and there'll be more and more data in there as well.
Great. It just seems like such a great tool that we can use in lots of creative ways to make sure that we're serving our students both from an educational and a social emotional perspective. So thank you very much, and thank you all for being here.
I also want to say thank you very much for the whole action panel. Thank you so much for being here and commenting on the use of performance matters. My question is, and I want to reiterate what Larry said, it appears that it is very dynamic. It can give you, and like what Mitch said, you can see the holes and the gaps right away and ensure that you can get the resources that the students need immediately, so that it isn't several weeks later or at the end of the semester and you realize, oh my gosh, they forgot how to do fractions, or things like that. My question is when we are developing the assessments ourselves, the individual assessments for that particular classroom, how are we ensuring that the assessments reciprocate the knowledge that should have been received across the district in that same grade? Say it's 3rd grade, and one particular school is teaching this particular way, and another school is doing something different. How do we ensure that the same standards are across the board? Are the teachers, the assessments being shared, like the 3rd grade math classes across the board, sharing the same assessments so that we know that the standards are being met across the board for that particular grade or that particular subject for the high schools or whatever? How do we ensure that the same foundational experiences are the same across the board?
I might actually ask one of the teachers if they could share how they use PM in doing some collaboration around the standards-based assessments. Kylie, it looked like you were unmuting. I don't know if that was accidental, but you might
No,
be
I was gonna say that Performance Matters allows for us to share, which is awesome. So if I create a test, I can open it up to certain people or whoever I want to open it up to within the system. Another great tool with Performance Matters in creating the test is there is a bank of questions that we can pull from when we create the test. So using the district-wide curriculum for either reading or math, those have the standards in them. So, I mean, as long as teachers, even if we're not sharing with each other, there's different questions we can use, but they are tied to a standard inside Performance Matters. So as long as all teachers are staying with the district curriculum and forming those tests and creating them off of the standards for that unit inside the curriculum, then they might be different tests, but they are still, the questions are still hitting those standards. And the questions have different levels of concepts as well. So basic skills to conceptual understanding. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You did answer the question. Thank you. Thank you.
Trish, did you want to share a little bit about kind of how, because you teach, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you teach geometry, right?
I teach geometry and algebra too. Yeah.
Perfect. At the high school level?
Yes, at the high school, and high school just adopted a new curriculum last year, illustrative. So our wonderful math facilitators have been super busy putting in common summative assessments. So if you're teaching the curriculum that we adopted, all of the assessments are in Performance Matters, which is also really handy because I don't know if you know, sometimes in high school, there's a little bit of schedule switch at the semester. The kids' information goes with them to their new teacher. I don't have to hand their new teacher anything. So even if they transfer to another school in Everett Public Schools, everything goes with them. So it is common, summative across the board, and Cascade. We have a goal this next semester of working on common formative assessments.
Perfect, thank you.
Director Berg, did you want to have a question?
I did want to say something. So I want to say something, had a question. Dr. Matthews, I'm your biggest fan. And I think you know that because I was totally geeking out on this when we first went to Performance Matters. It was such a cool system and it could do so much. And then we went into this phase of education where we needed it to do so much. So I cannot thank you enough for having the foresight to get our district on this particular system. And that said, I'm excited about especially the way our elementary folks are using it, because I can kind of see how that's going to follow our kiddos. Like Trisha was just saying, you know, being able to go from teacher to teacher and not have to hand over that work. That is absolutely huge. And then the other piece of that is what you had said about the data analytics, because I think as a district, as any district, we're rich in data, but if we don't use the analytical tools that we have to really analyze the data that we have, how on earth can we take action? So I'm excited as a board member to take action in terms of the policy steps you're going to need us to take when you start finding these holes and these gaps and these needs for scaffolding. So that said, about adoption is my question, because I really want to see those numbers at the high school and middle school level go just up astronomically in terms of use. And do you see that happening? Is this normal? Do you think they're going to come on board?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. One, thank you for your kind words. Two, though, I have to say, Dr. Salzman is the one that turned us on to this awesome product. I just did the scaling up. I just took his lead. And as the high school, yeah, I absolutely think that we will get there. Elementary is a tiny bit easier because everybody teaches every subject. So there's this natural translation of anything you do in math to everything else you teach. And I think as you get to high school, then you need to have more specific training. And I think that's definitely coming. Mr. Takayoshi, Ms. Overly, Ms. Shepherd, Mr. Balla, they're all definitely on board and learning, and they're getting those early adopters in. And I can't remember who said it, but once that first person takes off and says, wow, this can change our work, that's where you really have the power of the program. And it is really cool.
Awesome, thank you.
Director Mitchell or Student Representative Pilch?
Yeah, if I can just say, I really appreciated Alicia saying, especially during this virtual time, how do you know if they're learning? And the fact that we do have this tool that it can answer the question. I mean, with Zoom, you can do attendance, you can do this stuff, but this need for both engagement and learning, that I just really appreciate you specifically calling that out, of an opportunity to really see these kids learn especially during this pandemic. So thank you.
Okay, any further discussion, conversations, questions?
Yeah, may I say one thing, Madam Chair?
Please.
Okay. First of all, principals, thank you so much for being here. Teachers, you don't see me, but I just did a backflip because you were amazing. And like you, Ms. Forbes, I didn't know where the data was when I got here. Okay, I didn't know where it was. I was a superintendent. So, and to Jamie, Trisha, Alicia, Kylie, everybody that was here, I hope I didn't miss anybody. But when you talk about how you give the feedback to the kids and how, because I remember being a teacher the first faculty meeting, and when the principal gave data the first meeting, how I just hated that meeting the first day back, right? Like, I want my keys to my room. So I get it when you talk about data, how nobody really loves data except Catherine Matthews. But now you see how we can embrace this work and how you give the immediate feedback to the kids, and we get to see where our kids are. So I did a backflip. This is just a beautiful night, and I'm so proud of you for what you're doing and how you are the messengers of this work to our system. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And man, I feel good. I just feel good. So thank you so much for this, because you're talking our talk. Thank you. I know I'm excited, but wow, that was great.
Okay, I'll go ahead and thank everyone again for participating and helping us better understand performance matters. At this time, we are going to take a 15-minute break. I have 6:24, but I'm going to pretend it's 6:25 because it makes the math easier. And we'll come back at 6:40. So go take a break, have a quick bite to eat if you need to, and we'll see you all back here for an update on school reopening. Thank you. Okay, just in time. Looks like everyone's back. Let's see, looking for director. There they all are. Okay. This point in time, we are on to section 12.0, which is our information and discussion section. And tonight we are going to get a school reopening status update. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to
Dr. Scott.
I was going to say Kathy Reeves, but Dr. Scott.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. And thank you, President Mason, board members, Dr. Saltzman. We're looking forward tonight to providing our monthly status update on key areas related to reentry, which tonight includes an update on remote learning tools, specific details on reentry benchmarks and staffing, and health and safety operations.
Dr. Scott, your presentation is not full screen.
I think Kathy is driving.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kathy. So that's our lineup tonight. We're really excited to present to you and go deeper on some of those issues. Kathy, if you'd advance the slide there. We've included in previous updates, we've included visuals on attendance, and as you know, attendance is defined by the state as participation in synchronous or asynchronous learning activities. And while our student attendance remains very high in the 96 to 98% range, for the past few updates, we've shared some tools to gauge what we're really after, and that is student achievement, student engagement, leading to student achievement. So we continue to develop those tools to help school leaders gauge varying degrees of student engagement. You heard from Brian Beckley the last few updates, and we're going to hand it off to him to talk a little bit more about those tracking and monitoring of student engagement tools. So Brian?
Thank you, Dr. Stott, and good evening, directors. You heard earlier tonight about Performance Matters as a tool we use to support student progress. And I wanted to follow up from what I showed you last month on another tool we've developed in collaboration with our principals to dig deeper beyond only looking at overall attendance data to measure student engagement that is impacting student achievement. These tools were developed in partnership with our principals and address where the data was falling short, as Dr. Scott just mentioned, in identifying students of concern. And using these tools, we can really talk about the different strategies schools are using to engage students and support those are struggling. You can see here on this slide a snapshot of 2 schools who are using this with their support teams and their current students. I know it's difficult to see, but I'll just kind of highlight what they're seeing. Principals can take these reports from where they are, and we use a tool called Insight to create this visual, and they can download that as an Excel file, which then at that point, they can sort using Excel with whatever measures they would like to use from that report. The top snapshot, for example, is from Everett High School, and looking at the second student on that report, we've blurred out their name. It shows a sophomore who has a high cumulative GPA of over 3.6 and overall is attending. So if we were to look at attendance and GPA, the student would not trigger as a concern, and overall they show as attending every day. But the student is, however, not attending regularly enough, and you could see when we break it down by looking at individual classes that they're missing individual classes. That's at a high number, along with their missing assignments, and that student who has had a history of doing well has been triggered as low performing. And so Principal Overly and the Everett High School engagement team sorted this report, identified that student, and then provide wraparound services as an example. The second school, similar to Everett High School, kind of use that all hands on deck approach. That second shot is from Cascade High School with their intervention team of a struggling student who is not attending, but also having struggling in class. And so those are two different ways, but in both examples, the schools have support teams. They use this tool to sort and dig deeper beyond attendance to determine success in the classroom. And updates and looking at the data from our communications and learning management tools for the month of December, we provide this update for you each month. We see with Seesaw pretty steady from looking at December to previous months. For Canvas, we saw our highest number so far this school year in the number of parent credentials used, which we believe can be attributed to the fact that we are, it's a 6-week period of time, but it's also nearing the end of the semester. So of course, more and more parents are highly engaged in seeing and connecting with Canvas and determining progress. Our district communication tool for teachers, which is Remind, that's that middle figure, saw a really big jump in the number of messages sent. It doesn't correlate with the number of messages sent directly to students or parents, if you see those two metrics. So it tells us that we had a lot more messages being sent out, kind of more globally, sort of more announcements during the month of December. So as more people utilize it for that purpose. For our update on support with technology, our computers and hotspots have remained pretty steady for December and January. We continue to make exchanges with devices, so that number changes. So as computers become broken, we swap those out, and we have enough in our supply to be able to do that. Continue to provide hotspots as needed. The one additional metric I put here is the number of families that have taken advantage of the OSPI K-12 Internet Access Program, which provides free internet through the rest of the school year from either Comcast, Presidio, or Ziply. It's a really nice option for families for more reliable internet other than a hotspot or tethering to a mobile device. And we've had, this is starting in the month of December, we've had 35 families. We have several more that are in the pipeline. We also see a slight decrease in the number of work orders completed, which again is, we've got the winter break in that mix, but we also are decreasing the number of help desk tickets that are coming in. But that continues to be a focus for us on providing good customer service.
Okay, Debbie, you're next. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. I forgot to take myself off mute. We have had ongoing negotiations and conversations with union leaders throughout the process, which resulted in a memorandum of understanding with our education association around staff assignments. As you can imagine, much of our discussion has been around, with all of our employees groups, has been around staff and student safety. I'm going to focus on the staffing piece of it. So in October, we administered the special ed staff preference survey in preparation for stage 3, followed by the K-5 survey in November for stage 4. We worked with special ed, the special ed department, in making staff assignments and communications to staff. In the fall, when we were doing this, we chose to hold off on bringing the students back because we were having some challenges with our staff assignments. However, we have successfully returned special education students on 119. Having the opportunity to work with the special ed group, the first at a smaller scale, has informed us on how we should approach the K-5 staffing process. As you hear our presentation, it's important for you to note that the percentage of staff preferences for remote or hybrid compared to that of the percentage of family choice for remote or hybrid were vastly different from school to school. This posed significant challenges for our principals as they work to keep their teachers at their buildings. Mary will share with you in detail the process we used and the challenges we encountered and are still working through as we work through the process.
Good evening. To prepare for K-5 reentry, HR began by compiling staff preference survey data for each elementary school. We then collaborated with our regional partners to create a timeline for guiding our principals on how to implement the MOU language when staffing for hybrid and remote learning. The timeline also included work sessions for each region attended by an HR partner to be available for principals as they began using the preference data to assign teachers to remote and hybrid positions that matched their family choice data. Regionals, HR partners, and principals met at least 3 to 5 times, November through January. The week of January 4th, principals began having building conversations with staff to determine assignments. On January 15th, the principals completed their staffing assignments. However, I want to make note that staffing assignments do continue to change as staff continue to change their preferences. In preparation for the region meetings, HR prepared a folder for each principal with the tools needed to begin the staffing for the hybrid and remote learning in their schools. At the question and answer meeting, each principal was given a folder containing a guide for staffing protocols, preference survey data, work assignment language, and an example of how a principal used the preference and family choice data to begin teacher and class assignments. And we'd like to thank Bruce Rhodes at Cedarwood for all his help with this. Additionally, at the question and answer meeting, HR spent time introducing principals to the MOU language and helped them to understand how to prioritize staffing, honoring staff preference while using family choice data to create the remote and hybrid classes. Because family choice data and teacher preference data was most often not a match, principals worked extremely hard to honor the teacher preferences. This is probably where we faced our greatest challenges in placing teachers by preference and matching family choice data. Here you can see 3 examples of staff preference data. The green represents teachers preferring hybrid and blue represents teachers preparing remote. I've given you 3 schools and you can see that Cedarwood staff primarily chose remote while Garfield primarily chose hybrid and Jefferson was somewhere in the middle. This data is deceptive because family choice data may not match the teacher preference. Additionally, while matching preference with choice, principals needed to consider the prioritized categories such as high risk, living with someone high risk, or childcare for the remote placement and had to place remotely in that order. Out of approximately 650 teachers, we had less than 12 issues during the initial discussions about placement requiring HR and union involvement. This is really due to the outstanding and hard work the principals are doing in the buildings, working with the preferences and family choice data to meet the needs of the staff and families. Here's an example of a school's hybrid and remote teaching assignments. This is an example how the principal worked to honor teacher preferences and created classes using the family choice data without changing one teaching assignment in the building. And that was a lot of hard work. As we process this data from the schools, what we're seeing is that only a few teachers are being reassigned, and we haven't seen any teachers having to move buildings at this time. And once again, all the credit goes to the principals just working hard in their buildings. I'm going to bring it back to Debbie.
In addition to the certificated assignment, we are also working with our classified. And again, we've had ongoing communications with our classified association leaders, keeping them up to date on the status of our reentry and their working conditions. Since the fall, we have been recalling classified employees who were furloughed to support programs as needed with each stage. Paraeducator staffing workbooks similar to those that you saw Mary shared with you on a previous slide were provided to principals to assist them in their staffing and forecasting of additional needs. Principals and program directors are working really hard to stay within their staffing allocations. However, as we bring more students back, we're anticipating there may be some need for additional supervision support, such as lunch, supervision, recess, and the like. Substitutes, we are training them for both hybrid and remote, in-person and remote support for our regular teachers. We have about 400 cert substitutes, and of the 400, 250 have been trained and are ready to be called a substitute. We have an additional 72 paraeducator substitutes who have also been trained and are ready to be called once we bring the students back, K1. We are experiencing challenges in recruiting and building a pool of substitutes for HRAs and paraeducators, particularly special education. And in good times when we're not in remote and hybrid, we struggle to recruit special ed paraeducators. And there is more demand on long-term substitutes as leaves of absences continue to come in. Right now we have, it changes daily, so it's very fluid. So I can give you numbers of what we had yesterday. We had 19 certificated short-term leaves, and that is 6 weeks or less. We had 67 long-term leaves, which is means that they've requested a leave through the end of the school year. That's for certificated. For classified, primarily paraeducators, but that might cover some other classified classifications. We had 20 short-term leaves and 30 long-term leaves. So you're asking, what are we doing to anticipate and be prepared to cover the classrooms when our regular staff cannot be there? We are offering training to prepare our substitutes for both the remote and hybrid environment. The HR team has posted generic substitute paraeducator vacancies as well as certificated vacancies. We're screening applications regularly and again, providing that training to build our pool of substitutes. In addition, we are doing outreach and recruitment at Everett Community College for their students to come in and substitute when they're able to do so. And additionally, we are targeting emails to our substitutes, reminding them and encouraging them to continue to look at vacancies and to consider accepting the jobs.
So thank you for a moment this evening just to talk about how we fund this. I think as we walk down this road together, we certainly have recognized and made all efforts to use the staff that we currently have in place or that we recall from furloughs to support the instruction process. More recently, again, I want to thank Bruce Rhodes as a part of our bargaining team and the other elementary principals, but to begin to look at a more detailed utilization of current paraeducators. And I think what really became evident is when we get the K1 in place, we have enough support for remote and in-person instruction. When we start getting into 3, 4 in some schools, 2, 3 in some schools, and 4, 5 for sure, we're going to need some additional supports in place. We're going to get details of that more in depth here in the next day or two, so we can identify to what extent and what the costs are associated with that. I think we all know that there's a myriad of acronyms out there, and in December, former President Trump signed the Coronavirus Response Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. It's a mouthful and it doesn't even make a smooth acronym like HEALS or HEROES. Nevertheless, we do have access to those funds, and the legislature is in the process of creating some accessibility to that sooner than later. So we do know that the cost of providing the right supports in place will be covered under that ESER 2, as we call it. Unfortunately, what we don't know yet is to the extent that the legislature in its own financial crisis will rely upon these for some of the enrollment and transportation funding shortfalls. It's our hope and our message to continue to talk to them that to the extent that there are some of those funds still available for the things we need to do, and in particular, if you look at these 3 new options, really looking at how we address learning loss and how we address social emotional, and certainly we've invested in air quality. So moving forward, we're going to lean on those resources to fund the additional staff that Debbie just spoke about.
So I'm going to cover just a little bit of the reentry schedule, the timing that we have. First, I wanted to mention a few things. The key message really from me tonight is that we're continuing to plan diligently for the return of students and staff to our schools. There are many variables to consider and negotiations to work our way through, as you've heard some about tonight. And these plans and dates are figuratively written in pencil until the start date actually occurs. We need to retain the flexibility to respond to changing conditions on short notice as necessary. For example, if the health department or the governor issues some kind of a directive that would change our plans. We're striving to keep our board and community as updated as possible on these plans, especially as changes are made. We're also trying to time our formal announcements about the actual return dates to give our staff and community about 2 weeks notice before implementation of those reentry plans. And then the cadence of this, as you'll see here in just a minute, we're really still trying to keep about 2 weeks gap between stages. So the re-entry sequence and timing, February 8th is when stage 3 is planned to occur. That would be grades kindergarten and first grade, along with resource kindergarten and first grade, as well as ECAP, transitional kindergarten, and some of our self-contained classrooms. Stage 4 has been separated into 2 stages for stage 4A and 4B. So once again, stage 4A will have a 2-week gap from stage 3, and then there will be 2 weeks, we hope, until 4B, and then 2 weeks until 5, perhaps. So stage 4A includes grades 2 and 3, and then stage 4B includes grades 4 and 5. Stage 5 is the secondary students, middle school and high school. Right now, we're working on that still, what exactly that would look like and what the timing would be. We're heading towards or looking closely at a small cohort learning model. And this, as you can see, is still in progress. The development is in progress. And then stage 6, of course, is that long hoped for 100% in person, back to normal. This final slide is an update of the graphic that we've been using to describe our learning model status. It is updated with the information that I just provided you. February 8th for stage 3, along with the separation of stage 4 into 2 stages, 4A and B, along with some information about which programs or grade levels are included in each of those stages. So we will be providing, updating this and posting on our website, I believe, fairly soon. So with that, hand it off to Dr. Scott again.
Thanks, Mike. So we were really, really happy to be able to welcome back 199 students to in-person learning on January 19th. And the 4 programs you see listed there developmental pre-K, developmental kindergarten, life skills, K through 12, and our Strive program, which serves 18 to 21-year-olds. And like with any major rollout, we continue to reflect on the strengths and challenges and work daily on a daily basis to grow those strengths and support best practices, as well as mitigate our challenges. And some of the significant strengths, without a doubt, included amazing teachers, paraeducators, our office personnel, building leaders, operations leaders, and how they coalesced really around their planning and implementation. We have an incredible staff who work really, really hard in getting their classrooms ready, from spacing out desks, the tools, the routines established. We had transportation in place, PPE in place, and we made the adjustments in several places to ensure that we had what was needed, and did some troubleshooting in those areas as well, particularly on that first day. There are several programs that have experienced some staffing challenges, and Debbie, I think, alluded to several. For example, some unforeseen adjustments related to staffing paraeducators, for example, that have had to have been made to ensure program continuity and to make sure that those programs are running effectively. Kelly Clevenger and team are daily monitoring our staff to ensure that programs have what they need. And again, we were really, really excited this is day 6 for us with those programs. So now I'm going to hand off to Shelley to talk about elementary hybrid status.
Thanks, Dr. Scott. I have to echo Dr. Scott's sentiments. Watching some of our special education programs get off the buses last week and come into schools, there's something that just fills your heart in seeing that. But I would like to share with you a little bit about the P5 reentry for hybrid. So for our families who've elected for a hybrid return, we've targeted the date for not just kindergarten and first graders, but including our ECAP pre-K and transitional kindergarten classes for early February. And as you heard Mr. Gunn share on February 8th, we've just recently announced that. The in-person classes have 2 cohorts, with A students going to school in person on Monday, Tuesdays, and B students going to school in person on Thursdays and Fridays, with what we call the X day on Wednesdays. Now, with required social distancing that asks us to provide that 6 feet of distance, we've reduced the capacity in our classrooms to meet those accommodations, which necessitates the cohorting of those students in small classes. Most of those classes are anywhere in between 10 to 13 students, I think. In the X day, we had some changes. We created an asynchronous X day that provides support and time for elementary teachers and students. Those Wednesdays are dedicated to an asynchronous and synchronous, or real-time or virtual connections, instruction, and support at the teacher's discretion. So to begin that day, the teacher who is in the hybrid status will bring both the A students and the B students together in a virtual check-in, up to 45 minutes of time. Doing developmentally appropriate activities is determined by the teacher. We envision that to be things like calendar time, a community circle, so that it's bringing that connection back so that they feel like a whole class again. I cannot stress enough that social emotional needs of students are really critical, and we're trying to utilize that 45 minutes of time to do those kind of cell check-ins and making sure that students are doing well. It also provides teachers a way to not just connect with their students, but also do things like take attendance, check in with students, maybe set up if they need some on-demand learning. But the remaining time in that student day outside of those 45 minutes can be used for planning, collaboration with their colleagues, and office hours is determined by the classroom teacher. So classroom teacher may say, I really want to meet with this small group to give them some additional time and support. They may schedule that, or they may utilize that time as the asynchronous time to do planning and collaboration with their peers in preparation for both in-person instruction and the off-day cohorts as well. Both admin and employee facilitated learning improvement Wednesdays will continue to alternate as scheduled as we move that from Fridays to Wednesdays. Admin facilitated times on these days is really focused on the support of hybrid and distance learning strategies and implementation. So we're using that time to really help make sure that teachers are focused on their instruction and doing the very best they can to support students in either remote or hybrid instruction. The asynchronous day for all of our teachers will start on February 10th. So that first week back for our kinder and first, February 10th will be that first async day for our elementary staff. Dr. Scott?
Thank you, Dr. Bowden. So our Wednesday asynchronous day in secondary took effect January 6th, as you know, for middle and high schools. And the purpose of this structure, negotiated with the Teachers Association, of course, was to provide time and support for both teachers and students midweek. And as Dr. Bowden mentioned, this time is used to plan, evaluate student work, collaborate with colleagues for teachers, and some might choose to engage synchronously with individual or groups of students. There's a period structure in place so as to be able to still coordinate that synchronous instruction if teachers choose, so that it's a predictable structure for students. And it's also helpful for them to organize their school day asynchronously. Another feature of this Wednesday at middle and high school is a built-in 40-minute professional development time designed by principals and their instructional leadership teams. And this PD time is dedicated to collaborate and connect on issues that are, those issues that are really timely, that they're relevant, responsive to teacher needs arising at the local school level. That's why it's so important to collaborate between the principal and their leadership team. This also shifted, as Dr. Bowden mentioned, the learning improvement days to Wednesdays, which kind of set in motion our alignment with the elementary structure. And in fact, the LIW time is adjacent to that 40-minute PD session. So in secondary, they've got a kind of a contiguous, significant amount of time to collaborate in the morning. The next bit of information here about grading parameters in remote learning. And our collective goal remains, when we talk about grading, to provide meaningful feedback to students and families on students' progress towards grade level essential standards. That is the ultimate goal. And grading of assignments and assessments should always be done with this purpose in mind. And we've encouraged our staff to kind of keep that as the North Star. A grading subcommittee of teachers, counselors, administrators was established this fall to discuss how to effectively communicate progress by way of grades during remote learning. So students in grades K-5 will continue to be challenged to demonstrate success toward grade level essential learning standards, and they've been graded against those learning standards this year. And just coming up here shortly at the end of the semester, progress reports will include at the K-5 level narratives from their teachers that describe that progress against those essential standards. So for middle and high school, students have been graded this semester on an A through F scale. And some of the sort of the parameters around that, we established a grading floor of 50% in lieu of a grading floor of 0 in order to support students' motivation and their ability to demonstrate turnaround growth. So you can imagine if the floor is set at 50%, the likelihood of students engaging and the effort toward missing assignments and retaking exams and so forth, that's why the 50% floor is in place, one of the reasons why. And in order to support a system that remains focused on the evaluation of student learning, and this is sort of a nuanced issue here, again, with that North Star of providing meaningful feedback, that we want grades to be about that feedback to students and families. Grades as an assessment of learning should not include students' attendance and behaviors. And that's been best practice for a long time. In other words, we should not be using attendance and behaviors in calculating grades because, again, in a pure sense, grades should demonstrate what students know and are able to do against those essential learning standards. So we wanted to specifically call that out this year. So those parameters were set in motion collaboratively with that with that grading subcommittee. Again, with specific criteria designed by teachers, students are allowed to retake exams. They're afforded multiple opportunities to demonstrate mastery of standards. That's a value we have, and a practice we are promoting across secondary schools to be consistently put in place. So now I'm going to hand it off to Dave Peters to talk about student and staff health and safety. Dave?
Well, thank you, Dr. Scott. Well, as you can see, as we got into it this year, there are so many details that have to be accounted for, that you have to think through. And from the perspective of the instructional models to human resources, right into the daily health operations to keep everybody safe. And so because there was so much information, we found it really early on necessary to put together some safety handbooks. We put together a handbook both for families and for our staff. So they're two different documents. And we, the first one, I think we had out right around the first part of October. And we've had a number of different versions since then, just some updates. We consider these to be live documents as we learn better practices from other districts that we're consulting with, as guidelines change from the health district and other agencies. And so we just have a common link. So anybody that accesses that link will always have the most current version available. And then as we've also gone through thinking about how are we going to put all this together in a succinct way, really to be able to train our staff and inform our communities, we started looking at this through the lens of what we've called a day in the life. And so when we think about all the different aspects of a student's day and a staff member's day, it was really helpful to kind of start from the beginning all the way to the end. So things about you know, prepping for class ahead of time, and then as the students travel to class, as they're being transported by bus or however they're going to get to school, how are they going to enter the classrooms? How are we going to socially distance them and manage the traffic flows through the hallways as they get into the instructional environment, and how will we structure that safely? Bathrooms and toileting, how will we manage that? And dismissals and numbers and things like that. Related services for students with special needs, and basically our free time and our breaks, navigating those pieces, and into lunchtime. How do we manage the meals, right? The breakfast and the lunch, and all the details that that are involved with that. About recess, the supervision for that, social distancing on the playgrounds and those kinds of things. The use of our specialists and how they can help provide breaks for planning time for teachers, and then how do we maximize their benefit as well for students, all the way through to the end of the day, and the dismissal, and to the different types of dismissals. Some students ride the bus, some have parents that are picking them up in the parking lot. So lots of traffic at the same time. There may also be end of day care facilities. So having students be able to be organized into those separate groups, and again, managing the that social distancing and the safety. So all of those together, we've been used to create training for all of our staff. And we wanted to provide comprehensive training, but also timely. If we give the training too far in advance of student returning, right, there's a lot of details that that you end up losing, and but we don't want it too soon that that it's or too late, I suppose, where there's not enough time for adequate planning. So we're trying to find that just right spot where the context is right now, and everybody is benefiting from that. And so all the way from our admin, our office managers, our custodians, our paraeducators, our teachers, our substitutes need training as well. And then our maintenance departments provided training for our bus drivers and our food service workers in our food service department. So we have done a really intentional job at trying to find all the ways possible that we can help comply with our social distancing requirements. So starting with signage, posted all around. We've been in lots of buildings, I would imagine, where you've seen the stickers on the floors, and you can give those visual indicators that are also independent of English speaking being necessary. And then in our classrooms, we've had teams go into every single one of our classrooms and common spaces in our schools. And we created some metrics and tables that we use to calculate the social distancing capacity of each of our classrooms. We gave each student designated a 1 foot bubble in order to then measure the 6 feet apart. So really that's 7 feet in between kids to create a buffer as we created the calculations. And then we recognized that there would be a need for some, we call them subtraction factors. So if we had a sink in the classroom, we wouldn't want to put a desk right next to that sink area. It's a common area that needs to be accessed. Certainly wouldn't want to put a desk right by the entryway to the classroom or any other exterior doors and permanent furniture and things like that. So we'd come up with a calculation, and then we subtract off students until we came up with a social distancing capacity that seemed very reasonable and accurate. And so then also it's required for every student and every staff member in our district to declare that they have screened themselves or have been screened each morning to make sure that they don't have a fever or any COVID related symptoms, and that they don't meet any of the conditions for exposure to someone who has COVID-19 or who has those symptoms within a certain time period. And so the Department of Health on December 16th came up with an update that provided 3 different options for districts, kind of categorically to kind of look at. So one is a daily attestation that really it puts the responsibility fully on the families to check. The second one, and puts the responsibility fully on the schools, that we would screen the students, every single student every day at school. And then the third option is more of a shared accountability model, where the families are, that they make an attestation. It's a periodic attestation. So it's not every day that they have to make that declaration, but they are agreeing and committing to taking the students' temperatures and checking for symptoms each day. And they're agreeing not to send their students to any of our schools or facilities if they have show any signs of the COVID-related symptoms. So that's the family's end of the deal. And then on the school side, our responsibility is that every staff member visually checks and actively monitors every student all day long for any symptoms of COVID. So that one for the students, that option, the shared accountability model, is the one that we have chosen to use, and we feel like that actually has some increased safety benefits to it, and as well as some reduced logistical issues that in and of themselves can create some other safety concerns. And so that's for the students. For the staff, they certainly are eligible to have the periodic attestation as well, but there's also that other part of it where we would have to screen every staff member, check them every day as well, and so there's obvious barriers to that each day. So we already have set up for our staff a daily attestation where they're sent an email through their Everett Public Schools email, and then optionally they receive a text message as well. It literally takes seconds for them to access that and to do their attestations. And so for the reasons of efficiency, our staff members will continue to use that option. If students, our families are committing not to send students to school if they're sick, but if we do have students that show symptoms during the day, we have what are called care rooms. These are designated locations on each of our campuses where it's kind of an isolation. It helps to isolate those students from the rest of the population. It'll be escorted down to that room where there's a nurse or other designated person who has the highest level of PPE, or the personal protective equipment. to wait with that student until the parents can come and pick them up. And so when the students or when the parents do arrive to pick them up, they receive a letter that will outline from the nurse the reentry timelines and procedures from there. And this room is different than the health room. It's distinct from that. So when we can talk about our health room, that's like that's what we're currently used to. And that's more for our students who are, have got the bumps and bruises and your typical issues like that. But when students show any symptoms of COVID-related concerns, they're brought to the care room, which is a very distinct location. So,
And that concludes our re-entry update for this evening. And we invite President Mason to facilitate any questions that you might have for us or discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you to everyone who presented tonight. A lot of information. I hope our public is able to be more informed. I know there's some questions from parents that are still sort of brewing that maybe weren't answered tonight. And I'm going to take a go at some of this. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is sort of what the actual timeline looks like as we bring back different grade bands. So in one of the slides you had mentioned about a week and a half ago, staffing assignments were due. So at this point, have parents been notified that they're going to be an A group or a B group, and if their current teacher is going to be in place for them?
You have that, Peter, or do you want me to take it?
I go ahead, Kathy. I can jump in too.
The group that's coming back on February 8th, they will be receiving communication from their principals, most likely tomorrow, maybe Thursday, about what group they're in and who their teacher will be.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess, so I'm looking at the numbers for teachers coming back into the building. And can you explain, just for the general public and probably for my own reference, what does it mean when a teacher takes leave? What are they doing? What are their benefits?
It varies, but there is specific COVID leave that we have in place for teachers. They can use the COVID leave that we've negotiated, or they can use sick leave or their personal leave. And depending upon whether or not they have exhausted any one of those, then they would go on unpaid leave. But there's a period of time under FMLA where their benefits would be covered no matter what, whether they're in paid status or not in paid status.
Okay, thank you for that information. Director, student representative, are there other questions? Director Mitchell?
Yeah, sorry. Debbie, just for that, in Washington State, do they get the 12 weeks of Washington family leave and the 12 weeks of federal FMLA? So
they just get the 12 weeks total. And then some people might be eligible for the Washington State leave as well, but it's just 12 weeks for the federal family medical leave.
Federal, okay, but okay.
And that protects their job.
Okay, so sorry, I have a little list of questions. So just to remind me that students who are A versus B, if 2 days they'd be remote and 2 days they would be in classroom, but is the remote asynchronous or is the remote synchronous with what's happening in the classroom?
The remote is asynchronous, Director Mitchell. So there'd be 2 days in the classroom. It'd be the Wednesday, X day, asynchronous. For elementary, there's a synchronous check-in at the top of that day.
Yeah, no, it's just that
and
Tuesday,
then,
Monday,
and then
Tuesday,
it would be teacher directed independent learning that was set in motion from their time synchronously or live in person with the teacher.
Okay, so that one of my questions was just because I've seen some across the country where the teacher has some kids on a Zoom and some kids in the classroom, and I was just like, oh my gosh, how do you have classroom management that way? So thank you for that. Next question, masks. I've seen some kids and people around with the masks that sit at the chin and go up, and I've heard that for some kids with disabilities, sometimes that might be preferred, but health things is that's a catch-all for things versus masks. So if a child, I see on the website, if a child comes in with a mask that doesn't meet DOH or state recommendations, will we replace them unless they're a student with special needs?
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting here. Yeah, Dave, feel free to jump in after my response. Yes, we're going to have the appropriate PPE on hand for students who either have masks that aren't in sort of within the range of compliance, that we will have on site those that are.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know if, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I didn't hear anything in here if we have any testing requirements for staff or for anything like schools that are having everybody and jobs that are having everybody test weekly, everybody test this period. Do we have any guidelines, or if we have received anything from the county about routine testing of our staff?
We have not. From the county doesn't, they're not giving us guidance to do any routine testing.
Okay, so it's very employer specific. I've just heard of several employers that are requiring it. Okay, my last thing, and Kathy, because I recently had COVID, I really appreciate the website. So I don't know who, if you're responsible for that or who is responsible for that, the handbook, as well as all the check boxes. But looking at it as a person and a parent who recently had COVID, I have some suggestions from that perspective. Is there a way I can talk to somebody offline? Because I've got a little list and I don't want to waste the time here.
Sure, you can share your list with me.
Okay, so if I just email, or can I set up a time with you? Like, could we email a time just so I could talk it through instead of emailing? Because I'm seeing it with my eye and explaining it could be hard.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. But thank you all for all your hard work, and I love the pictures of the kids with special ed. Especially, I'm trying to put that student first, so excuse my stumbling. Going back to school, and I cannot wait to see the pictures on February 8th.
Other directors?
I've got kind of a little list of questions too. And I guess, thank you for the presentation because it was really informative. One of the things I wanted to ask was, it was great to hear that our teachers are basically being able to, it sounds like for the most part, stay within their buildings. For the families though, I'm wondering how much switching around has had to be done with that. So what I'm thinking is, so with a family, do they know what teacher they're going to have in this either hybrid or even keeping the same teacher via remote?
Yeah, that was the correspondence, Director Berg, that's coming out tomorrow to confirm those the preferences of families, whether they're 100% remote or in hybrid, and then the teacher assignments, and whether or not or to what extent there are any changes necessary. Again, the principals, and Mary, you could speak to this in a little bit more detail, school by school, because we're tracking those things. But it's such a intensive conversation, really, when it comes to that match, ensuring it's a paper exercise, and then it's a communication exercise and a humanistic exercise to make sure that we've got those matches by site. And we really do want to emphasize that those conversations are done in as respectful and humane ways as possible, because we want those matches to happen. We want those win-wins, but when they're off proportion, we've got to make we've got the principal then has this landscape where they're going to have to make those balances, because we need staffing ratios to reflect a scenario that we can support it and sustain it long term.
And I guess the kind of follow up is, so will families have an opportunity to to adjust, because what I'm thinking is, based on Director Mitchell's question, it sounds like with the, like, let's say you're on the hybrids, you're AABB, well, on those off days, you're not going to have any Zoom support. You're going to be 100. So basically you're kind of 100% asynchronous for 3 days versus being somewhat synchronous for 4 days is kind of what I'm hearing. So parents, they'll have a chance to kind of say, "Ooh, that might not work for our family," if they need to.
I think we're anticipating that that is going to be kind of an experiential thing. I think the way that you're describing it, in the sense, and we've tried to be very clear with what we mean by AAXBB, and particularly yesterday in the communications, to really kind of flesh out what that looks like. And even, previous to the community survey, trying to flesh out what that looks like. And then where we need some gap filling explanation, we know that principals are doing that, as well as teachers are doing that for any parent who asks for more clarity. But I think what I'm hearing in your question is, will they have a chance to reconsider? And I think it's one of those things where at the building, we want to continue to be in balance. I think that there's always ways to find, whether there's alternatives and what kind of room there is for alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be needed to be determined at the local level, meaning the school level.
That's good to know. My other question was around emergency subs. And so Debbie, for that, it sounds like you guys are kind of, shaking the bushes, which is awesome. So you've reached out to Everett community and some other places, but so is it just the traditional emergency sub requirements that you're utilizing, or can you even go below that at this point?
I mean, we have specific requirements that we have to meet, but we will utilize emergency substitutes at the buildings if we can get them here, beyond just the regular certified substitutes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And my last question is probably for Mr. Peters, just about the CARES room and our nursing staff and ratios. Do we, for our reopening kind of in this very initial phase, do we have enough nurses to kind of staff those CARES rooms for the kiddos coming back?
We do. It's really tight, but we've had to do some movements from even some buildings. I believe or at least we're considering doing that, to fill the needs. But the other piece is it doesn't just have to be the nurse, right? The health room assistants, some trained paraeducators. It's basically anybody that's going to work in that room just has to be fitted for the appropriate PPE. And it's just a matter of monitoring the students again until the parents come home. So it's not a highly specialized position in that regard. And then for our current students right now and the students with special needs, we thought that through too, because a lot of those kids, they don't respond as well to people that they don't know. And so we already have plans in place for someone from the classroom to escort and to stay with the student until the parents arrive.
Thank you for that. I think for me, just as putting on my parent hat and with, global pandemic and starting into this new phase of hybrid, it'd be awesome if as a district we could find a way to get nurses there. I know it's not super specialized and stuff. I'm just kind of saying it's always nice to know that you've got a nurse in that CARES room in case something happens, even if it's just initially. It just feels good. So that's just kind of my, 2 cents. But thank you guys all for everything you're doing.
Other directors?
I would like to thank everybody for their input in here. I know it's rather challenging and it is fluid. Essentially, it is changing constantly. My biggest concerns are what has already been brought up, as far as we're going to be starting something that has not been implemented before. We're not quite sure how it's going to work, nor are we sure how the children will react to it or the parents will react to it. And I understand that, parents will choose one particular mode of operation initially, saying that I think this will work best for my child. And then afterwards realize, oh, hell, this is not working for my child. And then we have to then go back to the drawing board with the individual schools to find a solution around that. And I understand that that might be difficult because we've gone through several iterations of what are the requirements for the individual teachers to meet, and then what are the requirements for the parents to meet. And we may not have enough paras, we may not have enough substitutes, et cetera, et cetera. So I do understand that this is going to be very, very challenging. And it's going to be something that is extremely fluid and that it will change. But we have to realize that it's going to change because we've not been through this before. And parents will have concerns and issues for their individual child. And I hope that we're looking towards, and I've heard that, Debbie, I've heard that from you. You're looking at the community college for substitutes. You're looking at different locations to bring in additional teachers. We may even find with our own teachers that they may say, well, I thought this would work for me, but now I'm a little concerned because no one knows how the external challenges with the Department of Health is going to go and how that's going to go. But I do thank you for looking ahead and trying to be aware of the possibilities of becoming very fluid and changing quickly on the dime to ensure that the resources are for our students. But we're going to have to realize that we don't know if everything that we've planned out is going to work. We should always have that plan B and plan C available, or that outlook as to where can we turn for additional resources if we should need it. And I'm glad that we're very upfront with making sure that we have all the PPE that we need and that we're providing it for those students who don't have it. It's very difficult for younger kids to wear a mask all day long. And so we may have to have several different masks for them, because as one gets dropped, you're going to need you're going to need to have the supplies available to pick them up and hand them out to our students. But thank you so much for what you're considering and how you are presenting this to us and to our community. Because again, I want to mention, we have to be fluid, we have to be realistic. There are some parents out there, I've heard, that they're concerned about having their kids come back in person. And there are some who want our kids to come back and be in person. So we've got to make sure that we can provide all the resources for them to ensure that their kids are successful in school. But thank you for your work.
So just real quick, Brian, I really like that tool that you put together with the principals and getting that engagement piece measured. I think that's fantastic, and that's I think that's going to be, like I was asking about with Performance Matters, it's going to be a great tool for us to make sure that we're engaging students fully, making sure that we've got all the services we need for them. My question, and whether it's Dr. Bowden or Dr. Scott that answers it, or whoever, is there any functional difference between the X day and the two asynchronous days?
Yeah. Go ahead. You want to talk about elementary, Shell? Yeah, I can go secondary. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We both have ideas about that. We do believe that there is some difference on the X day, which has a target of 45-minute connection time in the morning. And then the remainder of that day is at the teacher discretion. So that X day could have completely, after that 45 minutes, completely be asynchronous. That teacher could be working with other teachers, planning and things like that. there are some teachers who are planning on that day to have additional meetings or small groups, really kind of what we kind of call on-demand instruction. So if you have a group of kids who maybe they missed their in-person day or need additional time and support, it provides the latitude for that teacher to decide how they're going to use that to best meet the needs of those students. So that's kind of the uniqueness of the async day, that Wednesday, the X day. The off cohort or the non-in-person days, we're having a hard time coming up with what the catchphrase is for those days, but the non-in-person days are directed independent learning, and they may have some synchronous, like you might have a PE teacher who says, we'll be doing a first grade PE class at 10 o'clock on Thursday. For non-in-person students, they can join that group. So you might see a smattering of some synchronous pieces in there. Again, we have paraeducators who are also doing instruction, or reading coaches who might be serving students, resource room teachers who will be delivering services remotely. So even on those non-in-person days, you still may have kids who have some connections to a synchronous lesson or an asynchronous lesson in that directed independent learning time.
Shelley, might I follow up with an additional question on that point? The students that can't come back into classrooms because of health reasons or health reasons within their family, I guess I'm not entirely clear who's instructing them with the AAXBB schedule.
So are you asking, so just a clarifying question, Director Mason, are you talking about students who are fully remote still?
Yes.
Yes, so those teachers, so HR has worked in collaboration with our building principals and our EEA staff to find the people who, so if we have parents who have elected to do in-person hybrid and parents who have elected, I'm not coming back for a wide variety of reasons, I'm going to stay in the remote, HR, building principals, and the EEA have worked to match up to meet the needs of our families. So if we had, let's say, 100 kids at first grade in a school, and let's say 50 of them wanted to return to in-person hybrid, and 50 of them wanted to stay remote, then 2 sections would stay remote and 2 sections would go into the AABB model. So those students whose parents have elected, we'd like to stay remote, are being instructed by a separate group of teachers. So, you know, we may have some movement, like the student who was in Mrs. Jones's class is going to be in Mrs. Smith's class hybrid because they want to return to in-person learning. Right. We're accommodating those families that way. So it's kind of, I know that Dr. Scott has said this a couple of times in helping to explain it, that supply and demand component.
It's
if parents,
yeah.
So more simply, more simply, how do the 100% remote kids schedule compare to hybrid learners?
So the 100% remote students are doing exactly what they're doing now, which is they are doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they're doing synchronous and a combination of synchronous and asynchronous on a scheduled basis. They Zoom in, they may have some synchronous and asynchronous learning going on those days, fully remote. They might remote in, their specialist might remote in and do specialist classes and things like that. And then on that X day, they too will have a 45-minute chunk of time where they're connecting remotely with their teacher. And then that teacher has the discretion to do synchronous and asynchronous. So
functionally no different from what they're doing now, is what you're saying. Okay.
Correct. With the exception of starting on February 10th, those
going to the Wednesday.
The Wednesday will become an asynchronous X day to support that starting February 10th.
So is the asynchronous stuff that we're doing on the hybrid schedule, that amount of time, 2 days or 3 days worth of asynchronous instruction, is that equivalent to what they're getting now in the current schedule, or is that more than they were getting in the current schedule?
I don't quite know how to answer that. It would likely, the directed independent learning, we're providing the minutes and the materials that students need to be able to fulfill that. I think the challenge is trying to balance out. So if you're doing asynchronous, but you're not having check-ins with your teacher like you are in remote, kids may need additional support on those asynchronous days. The benefit though of that in-person instruction is we're talking about kindergarten and first grade classes with 10 kids in them all day long in person. And for some of our families who are really struggling with a remote learning environment, that in-person 2 full days of a really small group of intentional and rigorous instruction in person is worth the doing directed independent learning activities and doing that support on their non-in-person cohort days. So it's balancing those pieces out. You're getting a much more intentional small group in-person instruction, and then you have 2 days of a directed independent learning where you may not necessarily have direct classroom teacher support. You might have some other people who are checking in and things like that. So it's kind of a wash there.
Okay, I mean, I definitely understand that. I have 2 small children at home and have been at home all day, every day, this entire time. And I'd love for them to go back to daycare or someplace else for just a couple hours. But I also want to make sure that we're not cheating these children out of the time with teachers that they need, that they deserve, things like that, by having kind of unequal schedules. So that's my main concern. But thank you for your.
There are minutes, by law that we have to meet as a district. So
No, definitely. Just more about the face-to-face time with a teacher, that they're getting now as opposed to what they'll be getting with.
And I've just got a clarifying question just based on Director Nichols' interaction and just, and I think just to make it super clear. So the kiddos that are, it's like there'll still be the minutes, but the parents are going to be 100% responsible on those off days. They won't have that current, right now they've got kind of that Zoom for at least 4 days a week, if not 5 for our elementary, where they're kind of, on Zoom and being walked through lessons, and they're just not going to have that support for 3 of the 5 days. But also it sounds like the kiddos on the 8th, on February 8th, who have had consistency and they're staying 100% remote, they might actually end up with a new teacher on the 8th.
Potentially, yes. Yes.
I just want to put that out in the universe, just because I think you guys are going to have such a huge task kind of explaining it to everybody as they go through it. Just us as a board need to understand it, because we're going to be getting the emails and the calls too, like, wait, what happened? We love teacher X and now she's not here and or he's not here. What's going on? So so that might change. Plus it's going to be more hands-on for those 3 days for our parents. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to maybe at this time, actually, student representative, did you want to add anything, or did you have a final question before we move on?
No, I was wondering a couple of the same things that were brought up by the other directors, but no.
Okay, we're quite a bit over time here on this presentation, and so I'm going to ask directors if we have follow-up questions, which I think we probably are going to, that we use email and then of course those will be in the Friday report, and we'll also follow up with those at our next update as well. I just wanted to address before we move on, I've received a lot of questions about the vaccine for teachers, and I want to clarify for the public that we as a district are not in control of getting those doses. We are advocating heavily. We have a superintendent who's out there working extremely hard to talk to the right people. A lot of districts in our state are advocating at the state level to get teachers and staff moved up in the program that the state has published. But until we have those doses and we know how many we're getting, we really just don't have a lot of control over that. So the hope is that that we'll get some news here in the coming days. And as soon as we have those doses, we will certainly work very hard to make sure that our teachers get them as quickly as we can, utilizing potentially our school buildings and nurses to do that. So I guess stay tuned on that topic, since that was not addressed in this update. Okay, with that, I think we're going to move on. It's getting a little late, and I want to make sure that we wrap things up. Our next item of business is unfinished business. And this is the adoption of schedule 1400S meeting schedule proposed revisions. And this was originally in the consent agenda, and I requested that it be pulled from the consent agenda for some discussion. And the reason why is because as I was going through these dates, I was looking at the month of February, and we have one meeting in the month of February. Typically, we try to have 2 meetings a month as published in our policy on the 2nd and the 4th Tuesday of every month. So in the past years, we have moved to 1 meeting because those dates have conflicted with the 4-day weekend that we have over President's Day. And in the coming year, and including this year, actually, it falls on the 8th and the 9th. So we have an opportunity to add another regular meeting to our regular scheduled board meetings in the month of February in the school year 2021-22. And I would like to advocate that we add another meeting in February because what I have noticed, and it is because of COVID a little bit, but our meetings are running fairly long, and I'd prefer to have 2 shorter, concise meetings than when we have 1 meeting a month, the information really bunches up and a lot of presentations, and they tend to be more like 3 to 3.5 hours. But I wanted to get your input and hear from directors before we made any changes.
So Caroline, just to confirm, so this is a year from now?
Yes.
So February of 22, because the 22nd would be the Tuesday after President's Day, which would fall on our board. Gosh, I can't figure this out. My phone.
So this year.
Yeah, so the 22nd, if we're looking at the 21-22, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Then the Tuesday falls on the 22nd and President's Day is the 21st. So that would be our Tuesday off.
Okay, so it does go back. So this year it's not that way.
Yeah, so I think that we've never really tended to have 2 meetings in February.
You know, I was thinking this year's dates and just moving them forward a year, but it does change a whole week next year.
Yeah,
so I apologize.
This year, yes, we could do the 9th and the 23rd, but
let me throw out another idea. And I came up with it just tonight as we were going through our opening update and spent about almost 70 minutes on what should have been a 30-minute presentation. What do you think about adding a special meeting on this year on the 23rd to get our monthly update, which typically runs about an hour?
Yes, yes, please.
Rather than try and push it into a meeting in March.
Yeah, that'd be fine because we don't have anything that night and it's not a holiday.
Are you looking at the 23rd?
Yes.
That's the date you're looking at? Yes.
That works for me. I like the idea of adding meetings. I think one of the things I would love more of is just organic conversation. And I feel like we're always so rushed that we're not able to have the conversations we need to. So I think the more meetings we can, probably the better.
Dr. Salzman and team, is that okay with you folks?
I think that's a better way to keep everybody even more engaged. So you have my full support with that.
Okay, so we will add a special, so we will not change the 2021-22 schedule, and we will add a special meeting this year on the 23rd for our reopening update. And that will be a good timing because we will be into the new schedule a couple weeks and we'll be able to better understand how things are going and look forward to any adjustments that need to be made before the next phase. So with that, I would like to call for a motion to approve the 2021-22 school board meeting schedule for our regular meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will move to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Okay, our meeting schedule is adopted. Thank you. And now we move on to new business, section
So,
14.0.
Before we go, do we have to add a special meeting on the 23rd of this year? February, or
I don't think we need to vote on that. Is there?
that's the question. I don't know.
No, I think it would just go on our meeting plan.
Yeah, we need to update our annual meetings plan.
Okay.
That's
Well,
all
it's a special meeting, so it doesn't need to be part of the plan.
you just have to
Correct.
update it.
No, it's just that
Well,
that
with the
matrix we have.
that we track, we want to add that so that the public can see that we're adding a meeting. Okay, on to new business. 14.01 is approval of revisions to our real property use matrix, and Mr. Gunn is going to walk us through a presentation.
Okay, can you all see the presentation?
You just need to change your display settings. So it's in presentation mode. Up in the top left. It's the second one over. And just click on the top one.
Got it. Thank you. Now do you see the full screen presentation?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be presenting to you a little bit of information about some of the tools that we use to plan how we're going to use property, and then ask for your approval to some changes in our matrix, is what we call it. So the property management planning that we do in about 2012, we engaged our community on various properties that we own throughout the district, and especially those that were underutilized or undeveloped. And we developed two things. One is a framework for property management planning. This is as it says here, it's a framework to guide decision-making about how we develop, use, and dispose of district properties. We use that framework then to develop, and basically it's an inventory of our properties, and then a listing of how we're planning to use those in the future, and also how we're using them right now. So just to give you an idea of how big a task that is for us, I wanted to list from a high level, we have 13 support facilities or undeveloped sites, 27 school sites with active schools on them, 541 acres of property in total, and then our building square footage is 2.8 million square feet. So that gives you kind of a good overview of the size of our district and how we develop plans for our properties. I wanted to stop right here and say the reason that we're here tonight is really because we have two major changes to our matrix, and that is that we're going to add one property to the matrix that we didn't own before, and that is the Strummy Road property. And then we've also constructed a new school that was not on our matrix, so now that's on there. There are other changes that we're proposing that really reflect changes in how we are using those properties. So those other changes are really kind of a retrospective look at to reflect the reality of how we're using those properties today. So the property management planning, by the way, the framework that I'm talking about, as well as the matrix, I've attached to board docs. The framework, I'm listing the 5 major categories of the components of the framework here, but in the attachment, I have the full document that was developed in 2012 that really lists a number of sub-bullets under each of these categories. So that, again, is kind of a help. It's a guide to us on how we use properties. So right now I'm going to give you some specifics about the properties listed. There are 7 of those. these are the only properties that we're proposing changes to the matrix on tonight. So I'm going to go through each one of these and kind of give you a little bit of information about them. For some of the newer board members, I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the history of these properties too, just for your background. So the North Satellite Bus and Storage Facility, that one is, for many years, it was used as our central bus facility. It's on Everett Avenue near the freeway. It is in 2005, we moved our buses from that site. That used to be really our only major bus facility. So in 2005, we moved all of our buses out to a site near Boeing that we had purchased and then renovated for buses. And then since then, that property has been used as basically, we've leased it out to a number of agencies, primarily Everett Transit, and then another busing company stored some buses there for a while, and we were using it for storage. Well, recently we, actually it was like last April, we moved our buses from the athletics building and from the Longfellow site out to that site because, and this is the buses that we use for our own transportation services for special education students and homeless McKinney-Vento students primarily. So we've moved back into that bus facility and are using it now. Whereas in the matrix, it was shown as a potential lease or sale site. So that's the change. We're moving it from, in the mid and long term, we're moving it out of the category of lease or sale, and now we're going to be using it. The Longfellow Building and Annex, that one, we had also shown it as possibly selling, leasing, or even demolishing in the mid and long term. And based on the recommendation of the Longfellow Property Advisory Task Force, we are changing the mid and long-term status on the matrix to Everett Public Schools programming, so used for our own programs. The next one is the Norton Avenue Playfield. That is the property that we have entered into an agreement with Housing Hope that ultimately, if they meet certain conditions, would transition to a 75-year lease. The Housing Hope was denied a change that they were proposing to the city council. The change was to the comprehensive plan and zoning code of the city. And the Housing Hope is planning to use those changes to help it develop the site and build the kind of project it wanted to. The city council turned it down. The Housing Hope is still not yet ready to cancel the agreement. So basically, in the agreement, we gave them until, well, it's about another 2 or 2.5 years, depending on which contingency termination provision you're looking at. But the Housing Hope still has another couple years to meet certain conditions in the agreement before the agreement would terminate. So in other words, they still have a couple years to do something with the site. And if they're not able to do that and meet the terms of the agreement, then it would terminate. So at this point, what we're proposing is that the matrix would reflect the fact that we have this agreement with Housing Hope. So we're changing the matrix to show it in a lease status. Whereas before it indicated that we would be interested in selling or trading it, I believe, to the city of Everett. Seattle Hill Road site, that one, as well as the 180th Street site, those are properties that we've owned for quite a long time. We're changing those designations to indicate that they will be used as future school sites and not considered for potential lease because of the growth that we had, that we are projecting and the challenges of development of these properties. If we ended up leasing it, it would have to be for a long-term lease, and we're not thinking that that's going to be the case. And then again, Strummy Road site, that is, once again, that's a new property that wasn't on the matrix before, and Tambar Creek Elementary is a new school. So we're showing that for the first time on the matrix. So now I'm going to show you graphically what I just described verbally. And you have these as attachments as well. So basically those properties that I just went through and I talked about, the change in the designation or the reason that we're showing either in the current, mid, or long term how we're changing our current use or planned use. I've been through those with you. And now I'm going to give you just a little bit more, we'll give you a visual look at some of these properties. The one up here on the left, that's our north bus satellite site. So Everett Avenue is along here. North is straight up. This is what it looked like a couple of years ago when the city of Everett was leasing the western 2/3 of the property. Those are those red buses there. So we are using the buses, the east side of the property on the right hand as a satellite bus facility for Durham. These are those big buses. And then on the left side now, the city is no longer using that property. We're using it for the smaller yellow buses that used to be parked at the Longfellow building. One thing that's interesting about this property that you might find interesting, anyway, I do, and that is that this site is the original site of Monroe Elementary School. It was demolished in 1965 after the earthquake. And that site, the Monroe Elementary School that was on that site, was originally built in 1893. So it was like 73 years old in 1965 when it was torn down. So the district has owned that property for a long time. On the upper right here, that's the Longfellow site. This is Longfellow here, and then the annex is right here. 37th is along the top, north is straight up. We've talked a lot about that, but the Longfellow building was built in 1911. It operated as a grade school until 1971. Then it was used as district offices until about 2013 when we moved into the CRC building. And since then it's been vacant, and we've been looking at a variety of ways to use or lease or sell or possibly even demolish the property. So as I mentioned, right now we're working on the assumption, on the recommendation of the Longfellow Property Advisory Task Force. On the lower left property is the Seattle Hill roadside. This is undeveloped. We purchased it in individual parcels from like 6 or 7 different property owners back in the early 90s. And it is right on the Bothell Everett Highway on the east side, just south of Seattle Hill Road. And it's a very valuable piece. It's about 18.5 acres or so. That we believe is a future middle school site, by the way, for us in terms of our long range planning. And then the lower right is the Norton Avenue playfield. This is what I had just talked to you about, that we have an agreement with Housing Hope for. So with that, I'm going to give you an opportunity for questions or comments, and then ask for your consideration for approval of the changes to the property use matrix.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn, for the information. Directors, do you have questions regarding any of the properties we're being asked to consider for change tonight?
Can I just one question? It's probably a Jeff question. Do that Seattle Hill Road property, because it's in the urban growth, do we pay property taxes? Or are we exempt from property taxes?
Actually, I think I could answer that.
Mike? Okay.
Jeff, you're welcome to jump in. We don't pay property taxes.
Okay. Thank you. Because sorry, that just like you said, that's very valuable. So
yeah. Jeff, am I right?
You're correct.
Okay.
Couldn't find my mute.
We do pay sales tax, but we don't pay property tax.
Okay, because thank you.
Yeah.
I do have a question, Mr. Gunn. When I understand that last year was a very challenging year, and that the Longfellow Advisory Committee was supposed to be reporting out, when will their report be given to the board?
So they produced a report that was not as it was expected to be when they were first formed. Due to COVID-19, and this was when we were in the midst of everything that was going on, after the first 5 meetings, they stopped meeting because everything shut down. It was a stay-at-home order. We were all trying to figure out things. By the time we circled back to get together, it was so far past that time that we asked the chair of the committee and the facilitator, so that was Ed Peterson and Jim Dugan, to come up with a report that described the work that the committee had been able to accomplish up to that point. And that work consisted of 2 things. One was kind of a list of the factors to consider when you evaluate the future use. And then the other one is a list of the top themes for how to use the property. And so that was where the basically the first and the high, and these are in order of priority. So the highest priority was Everett Public Schools programming. Second one was Memorial Stadium programming. Third one was community programming. And then the fourth one was housing. So we're going off the first priority, and that's Everett Public Schools programming. So basically, we received that report, and then we provided it to the board. It was a few months ago that we provided.
Oh, it was, I didn't see that. So
yeah.
I was wondering when it was. If you could put that back in the Friday report upcoming, I would appreciate being able to see that again, please.
I will do that.
Thank you very much. And so essentially it was the recommendation because of it, and it hasn't been actually approved or any discussions from the board on that, has it? There hasn't been any, right?
Correct, right. And by the way, the original task force, the charge, they were charged with developing a recommendation to the superintendent.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they have delivered on that. They, at least, knowing that they only completed 5 out of the 9 meetings that they were going to have.
Right.
So we basically got it like an interim report from them and provided that to the superintendent.
Okay, I understand.
And we did copy to the board, so I'll do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So I just have a question. I mean, it was kind of along the lines of Director Lissen's about that Longfellow report. So is it my understanding that was it just kind of in a Friday report that it was submitted to the board? But I'm just trying to figure out how I missed it because I didn't see it either.
Yeah, I believe it was a Friday report.
Oh, okay. And that's how that jumbles up. But yeah, it'd be great to re-get that. But also when I'm looking at that property, the Seattle Hill property, that's so, that really is so valuable. It seems like we're a long, long way off of a middle school there because we're still potentially talking about a high school and so on and so forth. So I guess, where is the space, or is there space for us to start talking about maybe reimagining our property use and how, as we're talking about how we're looking at education moving forward, it might be different in terms of different ways that we're making education available for our students. Could we maybe have a broader conversation about the properties that we have and how best to use them?
I think the topics that come in front of the board aren't up to me. I would say that the superintendent and the board themselves in the summer workshop set the topics for what comes to the board. But I would certainly be supportive in whatever you wanted to do in that regard.
Okay, well, I guess I'm putting it out there because I understand that process, but I know that staff has a lot of, you guys are on this like 24/7. And so I'm putting it out there as potential. I think if it was something you were in agreement with or staff was in agreement with, we could get there quicker than waiting till August, which then puts us into the next calendar year. So I'll talk offline with Dr. Saltzman, but it feels like the right time to start talking about what we're doing with the property and how we're educating the students. But thank you.
Other directors or student representative? Okay, I'm hearing no further questions. So at this point, I would like to go ahead and call for a motion to approve the updated the real property use matrix.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the real property use matrix as presented tonight. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The property use matrix is approved, which takes us to item 14.02. We have a policy to review, policy 6230, relations with vendors, and Mr. Fleckenstein will walk us through that.
Yes, good evening. Before a district can enter into a third-party receiving contract, language must be added to board policy permitting crowdfunding and third-party receiving for school or associated student body sponsored events, such as school plays and athletics. The proposed revisions would allow our schools to use third-party receiving services that comply with the guidance provided to us from the Washington State Auditor's Office for ticket sales to school or ASB events. These revisions have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you. I think this policy update makes perfect sense in this virtual world, and probably long overdue and sort of pushed into action given the circumstances of this year. Do directors have any comments or questions for Mr. Fleckenstein? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move it to second reading. Thank you. And that takes us to our upcoming agenda items. Dr. Saltzman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors. At the February 9th regular meeting, the board will discuss the following: strategic plan mid-year progress report, budget development, capital projects update, student representative selection committee board representation, and December financial report.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and add that special meeting also in February.
Absolutely.
Which is not a part of tonight's agenda, given that we just added it. Thank you. That takes us to 16.0, which is executive and closed session. And tonight we do not have an executive or closed session, which takes us to 17.0, which is adjournment. I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's been a long meeting, a lot of great information. Directors, please feel free to follow up with emails or phone calls should questions have gone unanswered or you think of new ones as they've come up after tonight's meeting. And I just, again, want to thank everyone for your participation.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.